Welcome, wanderer of the quiet hours. You found your way back to DrowsyTeller, a place where the night speaks softly and stories unfold like slow waves on the edge of sleep. Here, we believe that even in the stillest silence, something beautiful is always waiting. A memory, a dream, a voice carried by the dark. If this is your first visit, settle in and stay a while. And if you've been here before, thank you. Your presence makes this space feel more alive with every listen. Before we drift into tonight's tale, take a moment to subscribe, tap that like, or leave us a gentle whisper in the comments. It's your way of helping these stories reach others who need a little calm in the chaos. Tonight's story is a quiet thread woven from wonder, a soft unraveling of time, mystery, and memory. It's about unexpected moments, the ones that arrive without warning and stay with you like the last light before sleep. So, let go of the noise. Let your body grow still. Let your breath fall into rhythm with the hush of the night, and allow the story to carry you. This is DrowsyTeller, and our journey begins now. The Moon Files, what NASA found and buried. I used to believe that the worst things were the ones people knew about but chose to ignore. But that was before I opened the gray drawer marked Miscellaneous in the bottom rack of the Deep Archive unit on the 4th sublevel of the cold storage wing at Langley. No one ever went there unless they were ordered to. I wasn't. I was just curious. The drawer wasn't locked, but the dust on the handle told me it hadn't been opened in decades. Inside, no folders, no printed labels. Just a single reel of magnetic tape, sealed inside a hard plastic casing, and an envelope. The envelope was unmarked except for a date stamped across the front in red. July 20th, 1969. At the time, I didn't think anything of it. Plenty of commemorative junk is floating around government storage. What caught my attention was the odd weight of the tape. It was heavier than any standard reel I'd seen. When I held it up to the light, something inside it shimmered faintly, as if a layer of fine metallic dust had settled across the magnetic band. That shimmer stayed with me. Not just the visual, but a kind of weight behind the eyes. I didn't log the tape. I shouldn't have taken it, but I did. Late that night, I ran it through one of the backup analog readers in a disconnected lab. No network, no external power, no chance of interference. What played back didn't match any Apollo mission record I'd ever seen or heard. The voices came first. 3 men, breathing heavily inside helmets. The quality was rough, almost corroded by time, but the clarity of their fear pierced through the static. I heard Armstrong's voice first, calm, controlled. Then a third voice. Not Aldrin, not Collins. No name was used. The stranger whispered, "Southwest quadrant." Marker 29. "They're not ruins. Repeat, not ruins." Then silence. After 17 seconds, a sudden burst of interference drowned the tape. The reader's audio meters peaked unnaturally, like something external had been forced into the playback. Then Armstrong again, barely above a whisper, his voice trembling as he said, "They're already here." That was the moment I knew I had stepped into something that had never been meant for any civilian's ears. I rewatched the footage that accompanied the tape. Partial telemetry data, degraded beyond repair. But one frame stood out. A static-ridden still of a crater, its ridgeline symmetrical, unnaturally precise. At its center, a shadow fell in the shape of a structure. Not a boulder, not debris, something vertical. The envelope had no return label, no sign of processing. Inside it was a single sheet of aged government paper with faded ink. A top header in thick capital letters, Project Selenite. Underneath, in the same typeface, 3 words, "Eyes only authorized," and handwritten in pen at the bottom, just one line. "If you're reading this, she remembers you." I scanned the rest of the drawer the next morning. Nothing. No more tapes, no attached files. But the terminal on the wall flickered unexpectedly when I passed it. The screen lit up without command, displaying a message across a black background. "Access granted. File 0. The system navigated itself, bypassing all known security protocols, before opening a nested directory titled Selenite Akka's Archive. Inside it were 10 documents, all labeled with simple numerals spelled out in full. I opened the first one. The document was a transcript, dated July 22, 1969, 3 days after the Apollo 11 moon landing. It began mid-conversation between someone listed as Director E and a second party marked only as Asset Black. Asset Black. "We didn't initiate. The signal predated touchdown. Director E. Confirm source. Asset. Black. Southwest of Tranquility, approximately 2.4 kilometers beyond visual range. It activated when the hatch opened. Director E. Organic? Asset Black. Not in composition, but response suggests pattern recognition, possibly cognitive." The transcript ended abruptly with a redacted section and a handwritten note. "Transfer all to Miriam Halverson. Her team's discretion is critical." That name struck me. I'd seen it once before, on a log of terminated contracts from the early 70s. Dr. Miriam Halverson had been a lunar biogeologist, whatever that meant back then. Her employment was abruptly ended in December of 71, with no listed reason. Every search I ran on her afterward hit a wall. Digital records, gone. Paper records, transferred to private holdings. Her address? An empty lot in New Mexico. And yet her name appeared again, this time in a memo filed in 1982. The header read, "Subject, Halverson Material. Storage relocation." Beneath it, "Project Selenite assets moved to Cold Storage Wing 4. No further public documentation permitted." I stood in that archive corridor for a long time after that. The hum of the servers was louder than usual, or maybe I just couldn't tune it out. On my way out, the overhead lights flickered once, then again. When I turned back, the drawer I had opened earlier was shut. I hadn't closed it. I recorded all this not to provoke, not to expose. Not yet. These are only observations. The first steps down a long corridor that may well loop back in on itself. I don't yet know what Project Selenite was, or is, only that someone tried very hard to erase it, and that whatever they found on the moon, it never left. They buried it between the lines of history, between canceled budgets and political gridlock. Officially, Apollo missions ended with number 17. The public had lost interest, the money ran dry, and the dream was declared fulfilled. But what I uncovered in Document 2, plainly labeled 2 in the Selenite Archive Directory, suggested otherwise. It began with a manifest. No letterhead, no logos, just courier-stamped text on aged carbon copy paper. 3 names were listed beneath the phrase, "Crew confirmed." Leon Snyder, Alexei Leonov, and Monica Trout. Snyder I had never heard of, though his name showed up in early Gemini flight rosters. Leonov was a Soviet cosmonaut, well known in Cold War circles. Trout's identity was a blank. No photos, no assignments, just that name and a blurred ID tag in a composite scan. Attached was a mission docket labeled Mission 13-57 and a date, August 17, 1976. That's 4 years after Apollo supposedly ended. The docket referred to the launch not as Apollo 20, but simply Event Echo. The header used the code name Project Selenite. Phase 3. Initiation. The flight plan was simple on paper but chilling in tone. Target site, proximal to Crater Delport. Primary objective, biological retrieval. Secondary objective, structure mapping. Tertiary objective, initiate communication attempt. The brief included coordinates far outside any prior landing zones. In the lower margin, handwritten, site appears dormant. Energy signature declining. Ideal time window, no later than solstice cycle. And then came the footage. 17 seconds of degraded 16mm film digitized into a corrupted video file, buried within the file marked 2. It opened with grainy views of the moon's surface, nothing extraordinary, until the camera panned left and the silhouette of an elongated object emerged from behind a rise. The surface around it was broken and disturbed, as if from impact. But this object didn't resemble any spacecraft I'd ever seen. It looked grown, not built. The surface was dark, iridescent, smooth in some places, chitinous in others. The structure was partially embedded into the regolith, angled awkwardly like it had tried to slow its descent, but failed. There were no obvious markings, no flag, no hatch, yet something about it suggested a cockpit, a front. The crew's commentary was dubbed in later, almost like a post-mission debrief. Leonov's voice was calm, but carried an undertone of awe. Leonov, this isn't debris. This was meant to be here. It arrived with intent. The transcript diverged there. Monica Trott's voice filtered in next, clearer, sharper. Trott, the surface is warm, not uniformly. It's like a heartbeat. We're recording pulses at 6-second intervals. Snyder doesn't speak in the transcript at all, just breathing, labored and rhythmic, increasing as they approached the ship. What they found inside was documented across 6 pages of interleaved descriptions, cross-referenced with medical logs and infrared imaging. The internal space of the object was described as hollow yet resisting emptiness. Sensors returned conflicting readings. One diagram mapped it as 13 meters long. Another logged internal depths that extended far beyond the measured hull. And then the phrase appeared, underlined in red, Containment Chamber Alpha. Inside it, they discovered what Trott described as a human form, female, suspended in fluid, partially integrated into the structure itself. She wasn't in a suit. She wasn't dead. The figure was curled into a fetal position. Her skin was a pale, golden hue. Her features, almost human, were symmetrical in a way that was unnerving, as if designed, not born. Along her spine were ridges, not wounds but extrusions. Something lay dormant there. And her eyes, according to the transcript, were not closed but veiled, as though sleep was optional. The report called her the passenger. A medical note recorded after the flight stated, "Subject removed from lunar site, exhibited no signs of decay or cellular breakdown. EEG readings returned anomalies consistent with latent awareness." The crew's condition upon return was logged but heavily redacted. Snyder was listed as DNR, do not return. Leonov was reassigned to ground operations and later retired. Trott vanished from NASA records the same year. Her last known location, private facility in White Sands, New Mexico. In the video, as they lifted the passenger from the pod, the recording glitched. The frame buckled, distorted, almost like it resisted being seen. The light on her skin seemed to ripple, a shimmer like that same metallic haze I saw in the first tape. And just before the film cut out, Monica's voice again. Her eyes just moved. I swear to God, she's looking at me. I stopped the playback there. I had to. I checked the original NASA logs the next day, no mention of Apollo 20. The highest publicly confirmed mission was 17. There were scraps of budget allocations beyond that, but each was categorized under Earth-based programs. No launches, no crews, no names. But the data in Document 2 didn't lie. I saw the dates, I saw the biometric readings, I saw the signatures, real pens, real paper. And I saw the object, that ship. They went back, and they brought something home. The logs within Document 3 were unlike anything I'd seen before. They weren't structured like mission briefs or medical analyses. They were personal. Not diaries exactly, but fragments of thought, scribbled observations, and audio transcripts that read like the unraveling of someone's mind. Each entry was marked only by a date, a short time stamp, and an initial, M. Sutral, August 22, 1976. Subject exhibits no decay. Skin temperature stable, consistent with internal ambient environment. Pupils, not pupils. The blackness is not reflective. It draws, it pulls. I looked too long and vomited twice. Not fear, something else. These weren't the words of a trained astronaut reporting on a specimen. This was someone being changed by proximity to it. Another note, later that same day, Leonov's having the dreams, too. Snyder won't talk. I hear her voice in the hum of the med bay. It's tonal, patterned, like language beneath language. I asked for audio dampeners. They laughed. They won't laugh long. The accompanying file, a corrupted audio labeled simply August 24th recording, begins with static. Then footsteps. The subtle hiss of pressurized air. Breathing. Trots. You can hear her whisper something in Russian. Then a low sound pulses beneath her words, rhythmic and deep. Not machinery, not interference. A drone like a cello string played from inside your own chest. Then her voice again, shaking. She's talking to me. Not words, shapes, feelings. There's something waiting inside me now. The file ends with a loud, percussive click. Something snapping or shifting, and a distorted phrase in a language I don't know. A linguist friend I sent it to responded in under 3 minutes. He told me never to contact him again. The next portion of the file returned to mission logs, though these were internal, meant only for black-level clearance within the agency. I wasn't supposed to see them. No one was. Entry. Crew exhibiting synchronized neuropatterns during REM cycles. EEG maps show identical phase shifts and spike activity. This level of alignment has no precedent. Dr. Trout requests isolation. Denied. Beneath that, a handwritten note added in red ink. Her signal is escalating. Consider neural shielding for primary staff. Watch a Snyder. Then a single line with a square around it. She is not dreaming. We are. That phrase haunted me more than anything else so far. It implied something I hadn't dared consider. That this entity, the passenger, wasn't projecting something into them, but pulling them into her. Leonov's final debriefing, recorded 2 days before his reassignment, confirms this fear. We thought we were observing her, but it flipped. Every time I closed my eyes, I was there again, in the chamber, staring at the ship from outside myself. She's building a copy of us, of everything. I scoured the attached biometric logs. Each crew member's readings began diverging from human baselines after 48 hours of exposure. Heart rates slowed. Core temperature dropped by several degrees. Eye movement ceased during REM, yet neural activity increased. They weren't resting. They were processing. Then the images started. 9 photographs taken from the helmet cam of Snyder's suit. They weren't filed correctly. just loosely embedded in the document's back-end metadata. Most were distorted, corrupted, riddled with exposure warping. But one was clear. Perfectly so. It showed the inside of the lunar ship, walls that shimmered like wet obsidian, etched with symbols that looked mathematical and mythological at once. In the center, a basin or altar where the passenger had been resting. Except now, she was upright, her head turned directly toward the lens. The metadata confirmed it. The image had been taken while Snyder was unconscious. I zoomed in on her face. There was no malice there, no serenity either, just acknowledgement. As if she recognized the camera, the observer, me. The final page of Document 3 contained no data, no reports. Just a short, handwritten paragraph, clearly from Trout, judging by the style. She doesn't speak in time like we do. Her thoughts stretch sideways. She remembers what hasn't happened yet. When I asked who she was, she showed me a mirror that wasn't a mirror. It reflected the moon, but the moon was watching. The entry was signed simply, M. The timestamp read August 28th, the day before Monica Trott disappeared from the record forever. No flights, no resignation, no death certificate, just a woman removed from history. I closed Document 3 and shut down the terminal. The room was too quiet. I could hear my own heartbeat ticking behind my eyes, that hum, subtle, buried beneath everything else. It had returned. The same one I heard in the tape room, in the hallway, in the static of the Apollo recording. It wasn't tinnitus. It wasn't interference. It was the sound of being noticed. The first sentence of Document 4 was a death certificate. It wasn't formatted like any official document I'd seen. No seal, no watermark, just a typed line at the top of the page. Subject, Kubrick, Stanley. Date, March 7th, 1999. Cause, myocardial infarction. Status, resolved. Underneath, stamped in black ink, was the word compliant. It wasn't the death that caught my attention. It was the way they described it. Resolved. Attached to this certificate was a video transcript. Not of a film, of an interview, never aired. Dated March 3rd, 4 days before his death. Conducted by a man referred to only as R. The setting is vague, but the subject is clear. Stanley Kubrick was afraid. I was told it would never air, he says, voice clipped, throat dry. That's the agreement. You give them a version, and they give you the real footage. But they didn't show me all of it. Only fragments, enough to shape the tone. The footage, the real moon landing, was not what the world saw in July of 1969. According to Kubrick, what aired was a sanitized hybrid, part documentary, part illusion. The real recordings were sealed within something he referred to as Black Cell Archive 1, a vault allegedly built beneath Mount Weather, a continuity of government installation never meant to be known outside of the intelligence community. There were images that didn't make sense, he says in the interview. Structures with shadows that didn't align with the sun. Objects moving without dust displacement. One shot, there was a man, not one of ours. Too tall, too still. Kubrick claimed that after watching the raw footage, he was commissioned to recreate a version for the public. Not to fake a landing, but to reframe it. To remove elements that would incite panic. His film team was relocated to a military base in Laurel Canyon, and the production operated under a shell company called Golden Signal. Another file, simply named 4, contains photographs. Not the famous ones. These are low-contrast prints on thick matte paper, edges curling from age. In them, you can see camera equipment partially covered with tarps, studio lights positioned behind lunar modules. The backdrop is wrong. The stars are static. repeating in the exact same pattern across several frames. In the final photograph, a clapperboard sits just out of frame. The scene title is handwritten, Selenite 3, Interior, Quiet Light. Beneath that photo is a note. Ensure secondary frames are burned. Kubrick keeps a copy. Control access. I found confirmation in a CIA logistics memo dated February of 1970. Subject K granted Level 3 clearance for Project Mirror. Deliver initial footage with omissions. Do not allow exposure to chamber footage. Chamber footage. A term I hadn't seen before. I located a file referenced in the margin of the memo. Mirror log page 17. The language was clinical, exacting. Frame 12 to 16 show biological irregularities. Subject appears to interact with lens. Visual disruption. Lines appear to vibrate beyond visible spectrum. Kubrick requests reshoot. Denied. There is mention of the woman, though her name is never used. One line reads, maintain controlled image. Remove facial detail. She must not be remembered. The documents shift tone abruptly halfway through. What begins as a discussion of logistics and media containment becomes something else, a kind of philosophical unease. In a letter marked internal only, a studio technician wrote, watching the raw negatives over and over changes something. Not the image. Me. I don't dream anymore. Just remember. But it's not mine. The deeper I went into document 4, the less it felt like I was reading about a film production, and the more it felt like ritual containment, the manipulation of public memory, repackaged in 30 frames per second. I cross-referenced the term Selenite 3, Interior, Quiet Light, with production notes from 2001: A Space Odyssey. One scene, deleted before final cut, was labeled identically. In the notes, Kubrick had scrawled, too close. Replace with monolith. Abstract is safer. Was the monolith a stand-in? Was it his attempt to tell the truth in code, veiled behind metaphor? A final document sealed the suspicion. It was a handwritten page dated December 5, 1976. The header was personal stationery. The signature at the bottom was Kubrick's. I was never afraid of the dark until I was asked to mimic it. What they brought back wasn't alien. It was familiar in a way I can't describe. The woman in the footage. She blinked at me. Not during the landing, during playback. She knew I was watching. I stared at that line until the words blurred. During playback. What does that mean? Was she conscious on the tape itself? Watching whoever watched her? One last item was tucked at the end of the folder. A list of theater reels labeled for destruction, along with one address in London. Marked beside it was a word in all caps, inert, the only item not destroyed. I tried to trace it. The address was now a parking garage. I reached out to a contact in UK intelligence archives. He hung up the moment I mentioned the term golden signal. No one wants to talk about this, but someone went to extraordinary lengths to ensure what we saw wasn't a lie, but a version. One that kept us calm. One that kept her invisible. But she was there. Frame 16, always looking at the lens. There was no record of her ever being named, not officially. No entry in any database, no coded identifier, no biological classification. Just a single handwritten word, circled 3 times in the margins of document 5. Althea. The notes surrounding that name were erratic, some typed in structured military format, others scribbled in pencil, clearly under stress. The earliest entry dated to September 4th, 1976, 2 weeks after the Apollo 20 recovery. It began with medical observations. Subject maintains ambient core temperature of 34 degrees Celsius, no measurable cardiac activity. Cell division halted, yet mitochondrial activity persists. No signs of decay. Eyes remain open, unblinking. Subject occasionally alters position within chamber despite absence of external manipulation. That last sentence was underlined in red. The chamber was listed as being part of a temporary underground facility beneath Vandenberg Air Force Base, hastily modified to accommodate what the reports call non-anthropogenic containment architecture. In plain terms, they built a room to house her that didn't conform to human safety standards, not because it was unsafe for her, but for the staff. The logs make repeated mention of auditory interference, described by technicians as high-band resonance with sublingual artifacts. Personnel began reporting headaches, vertigo, and dissonant inner monologues after prolonged exposure to the containment area. One staff member wrote, "It's not her voice. It's my own thoughts, but reordered, like someone edited me without consent." A neurologist was brought in. His name was Dr. Emery Delane. His notes are far more clinical, but the tone slips toward unease quickly. Standard EEG mapping is impossible. Neural activity appears distributed, not centralized in cranial cavity. Subject processes information via spine, possibly dermal tissue. Reflexes delayed but precise, not unconscious, possibly dormant. Then came the first anomaly. On September 9th, security footage in the observation bay caught 3 minutes of static. During that window, the magnetic card reader logs showed no entry or exit. No alarms triggered. When the feed returned, the subject had moved. Slightly. Her head was tilted, her right hand lifted as if halfway through a gesture. The gesture resembled sign language, but no known language matched the hand formation. Trott's name appeared again. She'd been reassigned to monitor the subject remotely. Her journal entries, now preserved only in fragments, shift from analytical to intimate. She listens, one note reads, "Not to what we say, to what we try not to say. She moves when I think about leaving. She still hasn't blinked." Another, dated September 12th. "I had the dream again. I'm in the chamber, but I'm looking at myself as if she's borrowed my body. She has a scar under her left eye that I don't have, but I woke up with an ache there. Leonov says he's having the same dreams. Snyder hasn't spoken in days." And then the signal returned, not from the chamber, from elsewhere. An anomalous frequency, nearly identical to the one recorded in 1969 during Armstrong's transmission interruption. Designated N1 in official files, it was picked up simultaneously by listening posts in Alaska, Siberia, and Chile. The logs described it as non-terrestrial pattern, recurring triadic pulse structure, harmonic resonance matching chamber activity. Althea, it seemed, had been reactivated, or answered. There was an emergency session of the Oversight Committee, the group monitoring Project Selenite under the Office of Advanced Celestial Phenomena. Their decision was clear: relocate the subject. Too many variables, too much exposure. The next file detailed the transfer. Not to a lab, to a vault. White Sands, New Mexico. Underground Facility Theta 1. Coordinates redacted. The last recorded footage before the transfer was a thermal scan. The image is low resolution, but distinct. Althea, standing now, spine fully aligned, arms at her sides. The temperature of the room was 6 degrees below zero. Her silhouette radiated heat in soft waves. Around her feet, ice melted in slow, circular patterns, perfectly symmetrical. 2 days later, Snyder was found dead in his quarters. No signs of trauma, no chemical imbalance, His final note, scrawled in the margins of a torn mission log, "She woke up inside me. I am not alone in my skull." Leonov retired early. He refused to speak to investigators. Trout vanished entirely. The last image associated with her name is a blurred ID swipe at the White Sands entrance. After that, nothing. A final note appended to Document 5, likely added years later, reads, "Containment is no longer physical. It is narrative. Suppress curiosity, deny anomaly, reframe origin. Earth does not remember her. That is our only defense." There is no photo of Althea attached, only a blank silhouette. Her height is listed, her weight, her estimated age, impossible to verify. But in the margin, next to the label Subject Visual Characteristics, a technician wrote 3 words that unsettled me more than any data could. "Looks like us." The first image in Document 6 wasn't classified. It had been part of a public release from the Clementine mission in the mid-1990s, accessible in low resolution from NASA's own servers. It showed the southern pole of the moon, the wide and desolate basin of the Shackleton crater, a jagged, shadow-soaked wound at the edge of permanent night. But when I overlaid that public image with the scan embedded in Document 6, they didn't match. The internal version contained overlays, thermal readings, mass irregularities, and beneath it all, a vague geometric silhouette just visible at the crater's base. It was too regular, too intentional. The file was labeled only. Survey log, Nightline Station, August 17, 1985. It included a flight manifest, marked as unrecorded, under a mission code name I hadn't seen before. Project Blackbird. The log detailed a brief but highly classified lunar orbital survey launched from an auxiliary base in Diego Garcia. No press, no media, no national insignia on the craft. Just 3 crew: Commander Edgar Blight, Imaging Tech Sarah Yu, and Payload Officer Jacob Weiss. The objective, according to the only declassified paragraph, high-resolution imaging of subsurface anomaly within Shackleton Basin. Evaluate structural integrity, no surface contact. The logs themselves, though sparse, were disturbing. Blight's personal report referenced several anomalies. A soft electromagnetic hum, audible within the cabin whenever the Shackleton coordinates were in view. Cameras unable to focus when aimed directly at the basin's center. A sensation among all. 3 crew of descending. Despite maintaining orbital velocity, you wrote, "It didn't feel like looking down. It felt like being watched from below." The crater's geometry didn't map right. Angles folded in on themselves. Something in the center shifted, like a lens refocusing. And then the interference began. Data transmission logs showed brief intervals of blackout, precisely every 20 minutes, lasting no more than 7 seconds. On the surface, nothing unusual. But upon closer analysis, those blackouts corresponded with spontaneous voltage spikes across the cabin's interior systems. Recorders, guidance, even life support. One engineer's handwritten margin note said simply, "Active denial field?" After their return, the crew was sequestered. Commander Blight was later listed as medically retired due to neurological irregularities. Sarah Yu was transferred to an unlisted research division, name changed. Weiss disappeared entirely. His personnel file ended with a blank form titled "Re-entry not recommended." But it was the attached scans that told the real story. The Shackleton Basin had layers. Beneath its natural topography lay massive structures, at least according to ground-penetrating radar embedded in the packet. Cylindrical shafts arranged in hexagonal patterns, some descending more than 2 kilometers into lunar bedrock. The term used in the diagrams, tiered architecture. These weren't caverns, they were built. The thermal readings indicated internal temperature variances inconsistent with natural formations. Some chambers appeared warmer than the surrounding stone, others colder. A fragment of internal memo noted, "Thermal anomaly pattern resembles life support gradient. Unknown if passive or active system." And then a second layer of documents. These weren't from Blackbird. They were older, dated between 1968 and 1971, labeled as Pre-Cell Survey Archives. One line, buried in a handwritten log, referenced a satellite anomaly in the exact same location, Shackleton Center, where they had lost image focus. Observed photonic bloom, duration 4 seconds, no external source, appears internal, suggestive of field manipulation, possibly observation array. In plain terms, they believed the crater was not only artificial but functioning, watching, possibly recording. A physicist named Dr. Delane, the same neurologist who had once monitored Althea's vitals, reappeared here. His report was brief, clearly redacted, but one line remained. Crater configuration may act as a harmonic lens. Not a crater, an aperture. That word, aperture, stuck with me. The final piece of Document 6 was a grainy photo taken from the window of the Blackbird craft. It showed Shackleton in shadow, bathed in the blue-white glow of Earthlight. The surface glistened oddly, as if layered with some reflective residue. But there, faintly visible near the lower right, where no light should reach, was a single geometric shape protruding from the regolith, a spire, angular and narrow, casting a shadow that arced in the wrong direction. At the bottom of the image, someone had scribbled in pencil, "Still transmitting." Then, below that, "Not ruins, not dead, waiting." And in another hand, written diagonally across the corner of the page, "Open the gate, she remembers." I stared at that crater for hours. The more I looked, the more it didn't look like absence. It looked like a design, a lock, a frame, and something on the other side of it, looking back. The word Gestalt first appeared in Document 7 not as a title, but embedded deep within a line of code. It wasn't labeled, indexed, or explained, just a variable in an outdated software string used by the Department of Naval Intelligence. Gestalt array.init equals true. That code was embedded in a larger batch file titled simply Update 17, dated April 2, 1990. The file, at first glance, resembled a typical telemetry diagnostic: signal distribution logs, low-orbit asset pings, orbital relay intervals. But what it actually charted was something different. A pulse, recurring coordinated spikes in a very narrow radio band, the same band previously associated with signal mu-n1, and it wasn't coming from the moon anymore. According to a signal trace, the pattern had begun appearing in satellite relays across Earth's equator. Quiet, subtle, wrapped inside weather data and astronomical pings. Every 23 hours and 12 minutes. That was when I found the logs from the Chilean Atmospheric Research Array, a small station, mostly forgotten, used in the 80s to study ionospheric anomalies. Their scientists had logged unexplained resonance events in February of 1988. The pulses had no natural correlation. They came at precise intervals, regardless of weather, solar activity, or tectonic interference. Each time, birds within several kilometers would fall silent for exactly 6 seconds. One of the technicians noticed that when the pulses occurred, dreams became vivid. Lucid? Repetitive? Entire teams reported similar themes: dark corridors, artificial light, voices behind walls. A psychologist embedded in the unit noted, "Suggests externally induced hypnagogia. Shared oniric structure. Investigate artificial entrainment." The same psychologist was later recruited by the Gestalt subdivision, which operated under the Office of Strategic Psycholinguistics. That division doesn't exist, not officially, but Document 7 included their manifest. Gestalt wasn't just a signal monitoring program. It was a protocol for managing human perception. The premise was outlined in a white paper titled Subliminal Modulation via Persistent Noospheric Anchors. In simpler terms, they discovered that certain frequencies, especially mu-n1, could influence not just sleep patterns but the content of dreams. And through dreams, belief. The signal was never meant to be heard. It was meant to be received, subconsciously, and whatever Althea was, or is, had become the epicenter of it. By the mid-1990s, the Gestalt program had evolved. They no longer just monitored the signal, they weaponized it. Civilian studies were launched under fake academic grants. Sleep labs were established in urban centers. Subjects were unknowingly exposed to MUN-1 patterns embedded in white noise, office air purifiers, and emergency broadcast tones. Patterns emerged. Test groups began aligning in their behavior. Minor things at first. Shared metaphors, recurring dreams, unusual bursts of synchronicity. Then came the cognitive realignment. People changed political beliefs suddenly. They lost old phobias. They became happier, but less individual. One subject wrote in a voluntary journal, "Woke up knowing things I'd never learned. Latin phrases, ancient glyphs. When I close my eyes, I see a face. She is not speaking, but I understand." Another subject simply stopped speaking. He began drawing geometric patterns on the walls of his apartment. They matched etchings found on the inner walls of the Shackleton structure. Document 7 included internal memos suggesting this was no longer passive conditioning. It was an infection vector, a neural carrier. And then came the most disturbing part, the reversal events. In a small number of cases, less than a dozen documented subjects experienced rapid neurological regression. Their memories degraded, but not randomly. Only Earth-based memories vanished. They retained dreams, languages they'd never spoken, names of lunar topography that hadn't been publicly mapped. In one case, a woman referred to her own son as the Mimic. She claimed he was not hers, and that her original child had returned to the stars. There was a page torn from a notebook, scrawled handwriting, barely legible, likely written by one of the subjects before containment. "I remember the moon before it was dark, before it fell asleep. I was there. I was her." At the bottom, written in a different hand, subject terminated. Cause, collapse of temporal self-model. Temporal self-model, essentially the collapse of personal identity in time. They lost track of which life was theirs, and through it all, Althea remained silent. Her chamber in White Sands had been sealed with 12 layers of synthetic insulation, vibration-dampening foam, and Faraday shielding. None of it worked. Notes from the site director show personnel complaining of auditory hallucinations within 3 hours of proximity to her cell. Some saw their deceased relatives standing at the entrance. Others claimed the cell was empty, though it clearly wasn't. One guard, during a recorded breakdown, stared into the camera and repeated the same phrase over and over again. "She's not transmitting. She's remembering." The Gestalt protocol's final directive, as stated in an internal memo, was simple. Sever public memory. Normalize lunar myth. Bury signal in noise. Reframe as fiction. She only exists where we believe her. I stared at that last line for a long time, because I had believed her. And now she was everywhere I looked. There was no accident in the way the documents buried it. MN1 was never a headline, never a centerpiece. It floated in footnotes, in corrupted frequency logs, in badly formatted radar reports with data gaps disguised as static. But Document 8 was different. It didn't hide the signal. It dissected it. The first page was simple. Black text on faded white. Signal MN-1. Origin, hypothesis. Neither transmission nor reception defines this phenomenon. It is not sent. It is not heard. It is present. The document traced the signal's detection as far back as 1962. Operation Fishbowl, America's high-altitude nuclear tests, was not, as long believed, solely a weapons program. One test, Starfish Prime, launched a warhead over 1,300 kilometers into the upper atmosphere. It exploded, and M-1 was recorded for the first time. The logs show confusion. This was no EMP, no gamma interference. The signal was organic, modulating, rhythmic. It came 34 seconds after detonation and lasted exactly 4 minutes and 22 seconds. A memo from a CIA tech analyst reads, "It responded, not to the bomb, but to the boundary being broken, as if it was watching for threshold events." After Starfish Prime, the signal began appearing elsewhere. Brief, ephemeral flashes of structured noise over volcanoes, polar research stations, and deep-sea thermal vents. But most consistently, it pulsed from a singular source, the Moon. More precisely, from Shackleton Crater. Embedded in the document was a spectrogram, standard black and green grid, and yet, in the midst of static, a pattern emerged, not auditory, but visual. The signal mapped into geometric spirals, tight at first, then slowly unfurling across the graph like a fern uncoiling in time. A researcher annotated it with a single question. Language? That possibility gained momentum after a 1997 incident at the Arecibo Observatory. A graduate assistant monitoring irregular transmissions during a meteor event recorded a sequence matching MUN1 down to the harmonic phase shift. But what made this different was how the signal reacted. When the assistant ran the sequence through translation software, an attempt to interpret it as data, his computer froze, crashed, and wiped itself. The hard drive was blank. Not corrupted. Blank. As if overwritten by silence. The assistant disappeared 3 days later. His name was Alan Kersey. His only recorded statement to the university dean was chillingly direct. "She found me through the sound. I heard her name in the quiet between the pulses. She's not a signal. She's what's underneath it." His dorm was left untouched for years. When it was finally cleared out, among his belongings they found one final page, torn and folded dozens of times. On it, sketched in black pen, was the spiral seen in the spectrogram, only this time, at its center, a crude eye. It looked open. Documents began calling it reactive information. The idea was terrifying. MN1 wasn't just broadcasting. It was changing depending on who or what was perceiving it. Like it was tailoring itself, finding cracks in cognition, inserting itself into memory. Dr. Delane reappeared again. His final white paper was classified Level 5 Consciousness Risk, but excerpts had survived. In it, he proposed a theory he called morphic mimicry. The signal does not inform. It becomes the format of information. It wears the shape of memory. It enters through attention. Wherever awareness is directed, MUN1 can echo. That was when Althea's connection became undeniable. An experiment detailed in Document 8 describes the first attempt at isolating her from the signal entirely. They moved her chamber into a vacuum-sealed Faraday unit beneath 100 meters of basalt. No RF, No magnetic coupling. Nothing. The signal got stronger. Researchers monitoring her vitals reported emotional instability, dream bleed, auditory hallucinations. One report mentions an entire team speaking in unison for 6 minutes without knowing they were doing it. And through it all, the signal evolved, not louder, deeper, like it had found a way around the physical. One voice recording, labeled simply 8th, captures a researcher sobbing. The time code rolls forward. Static. Then her voice, low, too calm. She doesn't speak in language. She speaks in recognition. In things you almost remember. That's why it works. There was a hypothesis buried near the end of the document. Unsigned, anonymous, possibly unfinished. A theory that MN-1 wasn't Althea's creation. It was Althea, or rather, what remains of her. Not a being, not a mind, but a recursive pattern, a mnemonic contagion, a loop capable of seeding itself in thoughts, dreams, data, frequencies. An echo so old it forgot it was ever a voice. And then I found the last item. Not a scan, not a document, a raw audio file, less than 6 seconds long. It played once when I opened it. Just once. It sounded like silence until it didn't. Something behind the silence, a shape, a pressure, like something moved at the corner of hearing. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid, because I was remembering things I'd never lived. It started with a map. Not of the moon, but of Earth. Buried in the back end of Document 9 was a cartographic overlay highlighting locations of ancient sites. Göbekli Tepe, Nabta Playa, Chavin de Huantar, the pyramids at Giza, the Nazca Lines, the ruins beneath Lake Titicaca, each marked with a small red dot, each connected by lines that made no geopolitical sense, but formed a geometry both unsettling and familiar. When I overlaid that geometry onto the Shackleton Basin's subsurface scans from Document 6, something clicked. The same radial pattern, the same angles, only inverted like a reflection. A memory cast in planetary stone. The implication was clear. These ancient structures weren't random, weren't isolated, and weren't built in worship. They were responses. To what? I wasn't sure yet. But the presence of those sites across time, cultures, and continents suggested an awareness. One humans didn't initiate. A field note from a 1963 archaeological dig in the Egyptian desert was appended to the document. Found basalt tablets with sigils matching those from Clementine Lunar Scan 17B. Estimated age of over 12,000 years. Not Egyptian. Not known. It was signed simply M.H. Miriam Halverson. She had been here long before Apollo, long before selenite. Further notes connected Halverson to a secret study group inside the Department of Antiquities known only as Orphic Cell. They had no official budget, no records, only access. The cell's purpose was to trace recurring mythic archetypes back through human history and see if they aligned with off-world intelligence events. One name kept recurring. Selene, the Greek goddess of the moon, depicted with silver eyes, riding a chariot across the night. Always watching, always knowing. The notes observed that in over 80% of lunar myths globally, Mesopotamian, Mayan, Inuit, Polynesian, the moon is not an object, but a presence. Conscious, hidden, waiting. The most disturbing page in the folder was not a report, but a dream journal. Handwritten, fragmented, and almost certainly by one of the early selenite researchers. It began normally. Dreamt I was standing in an observatory, but the sky was reversed. The moon was on the ground, Earth overhead. People around me didn't notice. Then, the entries broke down. Someone is inside the moon. I don't mean a person, I mean a shape of thought. She's not in the moon is her. Every night she dreams us. Every memory we've ever had of looking up, that was her looking down. I woke up and my mirror didn't reflect me. It showed a room I'd never seen but knew. Attached to that journal was a photograph. Old, black and white, grainy. It showed an excavation in Peru. At the center, a circular stone door, sealed. The symbol etched into it matched the inner spiral seen in MUN1's waveform. Below it, scratched into the dust, "Remember the moon." Another report, this one from 1989, came from a cognitive testing facility in Northern Virginia. A series of patients had been treated for recurring hallucinations of circular rooms, whispers in forgotten tongues, and white tunnels in the sky. One patient, under light sedation, drew an almost perfect rendering of the Shackleton structure, without ever being exposed to lunar data. When asked where she'd seen it, she answered, "Before I was born." I came from there, we all did. The final entry in Document 9 was more technical. An AI system developed in 2011 by the Naval Advanced Research Group had been trained to recognize symbol fragments from ancient texts. It was fed patterns from MUN-1 and tasked with finding matches across human records. After 14 minutes, the system shut itself down. Its last output was a single phrase, written in ancient Akkadian: "She does not sleep. She remembers us all." There were no follow-up entries, no explanations, but one last image was embedded at the bottom of the file. Not labeled, not in any database. A photo taken from lunar orbit, far beyond Shackleton, near the Terminator line. The edge of day and night. A flat expanse of dust. Nothing visible, until you adjusted the contrast. There, nearly invisible in the shadow, a row of vertical pillars, aligned with uncanny precision. 5 of them, tall, thin, silent, and at the end of the row, just barely peeking from the regolith, a face. Not carved, not sculpted, not broken by erosion. A face looking upward, pale, symmetrical, not human, not alien. Althea, or what was left of her. I stared at that face until I could no longer blink. The patterns in her skin mirrored Shackleton. Her jawline matched the curvature of the crescent moon. Her eyes were closed, but I didn't believe it. She was never asleep. We were, and now we were beginning to wake. There is no date on Document 10, no header, no classification marks, just a single sentence at the top of the first page, typed in a font no longer used by any known government system. The vessel is memory. The signal is thought. She is both. The document doesn't begin with data or images. It begins with a letter, unsigned, not addressed to anyone. A voice, disembodied and raw. The phrasing is intimate, nearly poetic, as if the writer had crossed the threshold between science and something older. We thought we had discovered her. We never did. She allowed us to find pieces, reflections, echoes, shadows cast by her own forgetting. She does not live in time. She swims beneath it, like a leviathan beneath a frozen lake. The letter continues in fragmented bursts. It speaks of Althea not as a biological being or even an entity, but as a condition, a layer of reality we do not usually perceive, like the sensation of being watched when we are alone, or the way we sometimes know a word before we hear it. She is presence before presence, a thought older than language. The next section is a transcript recovered from a signal interception made in 2003. It is a transmission not from Earth or Moon, but from one of the Voyager spacecraft. The signal wasn't detected through normal channels. It arrived encoded in background radiation picked up during analysis of cosmic microwave data. The translated message, translated through an experimental software designed to analyze nonverbal frequency meaning, contained just 5 words. The gate remembers your face. No source, no destination, just a loop, repeating endlessly for 18 hours. An embedded diagram followed. It showed the moon, but not as we know it. Internal layers were labeled, not crust, mantle, or core, but memory field, observer veil, and transmission lattice. The crater, Shackleton, was labeled simply as interface point. Another label, return channel active. A second diagram, more abstract, mapped Earth's consciousness, media flow, cultural memory, population attention. The diagram connected every major religious iconography back to a central node, lunar recognition event. They believed that the moon, or what lies inside it, is not just watching, but guiding the way we remember ourselves. That's when the final logs began to make sense. Trott's final message was recovered not from a base, not from White Sands, but from a weather satellite's internal cache, completely unrelated to any known data system. It was encrypted in cloud shadow telemetry, not radio, not text, light patterns. Decoded, it read, "I entered her dream." It was not a place. It was a structure made of every memory we lost before we were born. I saw cities on fire beneath black skies. I saw children speaking in spirals. I saw us, not as we are, but as we were. She was not showing me the past. She was showing me the future. Another recovered file, an internal camera feed from a now demolished research site beneath the Arctic shelf, shows a man seated in a room alone. The footage is silent. Time-stamped August 12, 2007. For 7 minutes, he does nothing. Then he speaks without moving his lips. His voice fills the room, not through the mic, but within the recording metadata itself, an impossibility. He says, "She remembers your name. She whispered it into the moon before you were born. That is why you've always looked up." The final paragraph in the document wasn't part of any report. It was handwritten on aged paper, scanned and attached without metadata. It says, "There will come a night when every satellite fails at once, when every signal goes silent but one. You will hear her name, not aloud, but in your blood. You will feel drawn to the sea, to the sky, to the stone. You will not be afraid, because the fear is already behind you. It was left in the womb long ago when she chose to follow you here. You are not her first dream, but you may be the last." Below that, scrawled in fading ink, are 4 final words. "The moon is opening." I didn't understand what that meant until last night. I woke at exactly 3:33 a.m. My phone was off. My computer too. But the screen of my old tape deck, the one I used to review the first Apollo recording, was blinking. No sound, no video, just one line. "She remembers you." I hadn't powered it in months. Outside, the moon was full, perfectly still, perfectly white, and I swear, it blinked. The Dulce Dossier. Transmission 7. The sound wasn't loud. It was buried deep in the sweep of high-altitude radio noise, somewhere between atmospheric backscatter and thermal hiss. If you weren't looking for it, you wouldn't find it. But Luis Caldera had been looking for something, anything, strange. That was his purpose every night after midnight, scanning the amateur spectrum from the tiny lab he built in the back of his RV just outside Taos, New Mexico. The signal came in on the 3rd of November, 2024, at precisely 2:47 a.m. local time. It registered for just under 6 seconds, presenting as a low-frequency pulse, non-sinusoidal, irregular, and modulated in a pattern that didn't match any known artificial sources. Luis thought it might have been military until he ran it through a bandpass filter and saw the harmonic structure. It wasn't natural, but it wasn't human either. There was intention in it. Beneath the hiss of static and electronic phase collapse, there were buried artifacts, tonal elements that almost formed syllables, and then something stranger. A timed drop in carrier wave as if someone or something were trying to mask the message. From itself, he saved the file under the name 1, and that same night uploaded it to an obscure forum on a server located in Romania. The post's title was simple: "Can anyone else hear the voice under the ground?" The body of the message was a single sentence: "This was not meant for us. It was meant for someone deeper." 6 hours later, the post was gone. Not deleted, rolled back. The entire thread was reverted to its previous version, as if the post had never existed. But Luis received a private message from a user with no profile data and no visible handle. The message consisted of a download link and 3 words: "You found her." The file was small, just under 7 megabytes. Inside was a single compressed folder labeled Dulce Transmission 7. When opened, it revealed a broken directory tree, folders half-labeled, file types mismatched, dates spanning decades. Most of the documents refused to open. One folder simply crashed the system, but among the fragments, one text file stood out. No extension, just a name. This is where it started. The file opened with a header block in monospaced text: "Recovered comms. Incident Archuleta, Mesa Sector Delta, Level 0. Timestamp, May 19, 1983. Beneath it, a line-by-line transcript of what appeared to be an intercepted conversation between 2 technicians, labeled only as C and J. C, breathless: "You saw it?" J, "It blinked, man. There's nothing down there, and it blinked." Then static. 9 full seconds of dead bandwidth, followed by an automated message, looping once: "Containment breach protocol triggered. Level escalation imminent. Memory event detected." The script continued for 17 more lines before ending abruptly with a corrupted block of symbols. The final line, mostly readable, repeated a phrase 4 times: "They are not asleep. We are." Luis downloaded the rest of the archive and began dissecting the waveform from the original recording. He layered the spectrogram over topographical data and noticed something that didn't make sense. The signal's echo profile matched subsurface voids located beneath the Archuleta Mesa. These patterns weren't echoes off solid rock. They were reflections through open space. Deep, structured chambers, unregistered on any geological survey since the 1990s. He cross-referenced the coordinates with older USGS charts and discovered that the most recent public mapping of that region stopped at a depth of 700 feet. All deeper readings were classified by Department of Energy Directive No. 578-Charlie. The reason listed was legacy mineral stabilization, a term Luis had never seen used anywhere else. On a hunch, he posted a truncated version of the signal on another forum, embedded in a spectrogram image. He encoded it using visible light modulation, just enough that those who knew where to look would notice the embedded pulse. Within 12 minutes, the image was reposted to a darknet file board with a comment attached: "She hears through time. Stop amplifying." He received a second message that night, sent via Onion proxy and labeled 2. It contained no body text, only an audio clip. He opened it on a quarantined laptop. This time, the signal wasn't just a pulse. It was structured speech, or something like it. Low, rhythmic, broken. a sound like lungs that had never drawn air, trying to speak beneath pressure. The voice was not male or female. It did not form English words, but Luis swore it said his name. He tore the laptop apart after that, physically, piece by piece. Then he destroyed the antenna array, burned every hard drive in a steel drum, and vanished. His landlord found the RV abandoned a week later. Inside was only a USB stick, sealed in black tape, with one file on it. 3. The file was text-only, but heavily corrupted. The visible lines read, "Transmission 7 confirmed. Gate is unstable. Memories bleeding into surface. Non-local entities mapped to dream structures. Command node believes we can still close it, but the key was overwritten. You were the redundancy." No one has heard from Luis since. His forum accounts are offline. His satellite rig is gone, but the first signal, the one he posted, the 6-second fragment, still exists. It's copied, spread, mirrored on sites that pretend not to know they host it. I downloaded it last night. I shouldn't have, but I did, and when I played it, I didn't hear static. I heard a door open, and something step closer. The tape begins mid-sentence, already crackling. It's an old recording, clearly analog, digitized poorly, possibly intentionally degraded. The voice is familiar to anyone who spent time in the stranger corners of government secrecy. Phil Schneider, former geologist, structural engineer, and self-proclaimed survivor of an underground war. "I didn't sign up to die for an alien breeding program," he says, followed by coughing and a delay in the feed. The transcription software struggles with the background noise. There's a faint hum, possibly feedback, possibly something else. The file is labeled simply 5. This isn't one of the known recordings, the ones circulated online, the conference speeches, the shaky camcorder clips. This one isn't public. The metadata traces to a Department of Interior server cluster, repurposed for continuity documentation during the Carter administration. It was buried in a folder of geological reports. The recording resumes, clearer. "They told us it was just a shaft collapse, south quadrant near the cooling rods, but there was no gas leak, no pressure fault. The stone was cut, clean, symmetrical, like a scalpel had gone through quartz and basalt." Pause. Then came the smell. That's what I remember most. Not sulfur, not decay, copper, burnt copper and skin. It hit us before we saw anything. No sound for nearly 10 seconds. Then, faintly, something like metal dragging across a floor. Not part of the recording. It's in the file itself. As if something was recorded inside the tape that even Schneider didn't hear when speaking. I was working level 3, contracted through Bechtel under a different name. No one called it Dulcie. Not officially. It was Facility 27 Charlie. He begins listing names, most redacted, others only partially audible. But one sticks out. Dr. Grant Mallory, cross-referenced in Document 9 as a project lead in cross-species neural tolerance trials. I didn't know about the levels beneath 5 until the incident. They didn't show up on blueprints, not even classified ones, but they exist. I saw them. I went down. At this point, the recording cuts to static, then resumes from a different source. Not a continuation, another file, spliced in. The second source is a deposition transcript labeled Session 11. It appears to be from a legal review, or perhaps a psychological assessment. The text is typewritten, pages scanned, marked "Do not archive" in fading red ink. Q. You maintain that what you encountered was not human. A. Not in any biological sense we understand. Q. Describe its behavior. A. It didn't move the way a living thing should. It was aware of us before we entered the corridor. It was waiting. I think it recognized us, not as people, as tools. Q. Tools? A. For breeding, for memory, for replication, that's what they said. Q. Who said? A. The technicians, the ones with the eyes. Q. Eyes. A. They weren't prosthetics, they weren't goggles. The black was inside their skulls. They weren't seeing out. Something else was seeing in. The record ends abruptly. The final line, handwritten in the margin of the transcript, reads, Disassociate. Subject exhibiting bleed. Contain recall loop. A third file is embedded, hidden within a compressed packet disguised as an image. When decrypted, it reveals an internal memo from Los Alamos dated June 9, 1980. The document references post-mortem review of interspecies interface breakdown at Dulce Sector G and lists casualties as non-numeric. A typed correction is stapled to the second page. Do not quantify bodies. They are not all ours. Attached to the memo is a heavily redacted incident diagram. Levels are marked L1 through L7. Only 2 are labeled. L3 as human administrative and L7 as no contact, hold for reversal. The final document in this batch is an envelope scan, unmarked. Inside, a small strip of silver film, digitized with the note, recovered from Schneider residence 2 months before death. The image is blurry, grainy. It shows a corridor, metal, stark, hospital lighting. At the edge of the frame, a figure is just visible, not standing, hanging. Suspended, head tilted back unnaturally, skin pale and smooth like ceramic. No visible eyes. A slit where a mouth should be. Tubes or veins emerge from the spine and run into the ceiling. On the wall behind it, barely legible, is something scratched into the steel. Level 7 never closed. Schneider's death, ruled a suicide, has anomalies. The tubing used was not standard medical material. The knots were professional, complex. The coroner noted markings on his shoulders, consistent with restraints. All surveillance footage from the area was accidentally overwritten during elevator maintenance. No agency claimed oversight. No agency took responsibility. One last note is appended to the folder. Text only, no author. He wasn't leaking secrets. He was processing memory. It was trying to get out, through him. The base doesn't hide from us. It hides inside us. The folder labeled 3 contained no text files, no videos. Just a corrupted CAD diagram and a set of fragmented engineering notes stored as black and white scans. The diagram, when forced open, revealed a sectional layout of what appeared to be a subterranean complex beneath Archuleta Mesa, divided into 7 horizontal layers. The top 3 resembled conventional military infrastructure: loading bays, personnel barracks, decontamination chambers. The 4th and 5th were clearly research wings, dozens of sealed labs, low-pressure zones, and what appeared to be multiple cryostasis vaults labeled simply B-labs. But the deeper layers shifted in tone, geometry, structure, even language used in. The legends changed. Level 6 was partially erased. Several rooms were redacted, not with digital sensors, but as if the original digital file had been corroded. Only traces remained. Partial schematics of curved hallways, pressure-regulated corridors with 8-inch walls, and an unlabeled black zone branching out into the perimeter with a note beside it. Do not run active power through Zone 4. Resonance. Anomaly. Level 7 was nearly blank. No walls, no measurements, no structure. Just a vast black circle spanning over 2,000 feet wide, with a single word placed at the center in red type: hold. Attached to the diagram were engineers' log pages, scanned, yellowed, annotated with panicked handwriting. The first page begins calmly, dated August 12, 1978. Initial excavation teams reached sublayer 3 with no resistance. Granite integrity maintained. DoD wants lower access by November. Civilian contractors only aware of up to level 3. All lower schematics classified under project designation Echo Meridian. A note scribbled in blue ink at the top margin reads, "Why are we building levels for which there is no infrastructure plan?" The following entries grow increasingly erratic. L4 almost complete. Biopod labs to be shipped in crates disguised as water tanks. No windows, no observers. Security insists the external containers never be opened except inside the reinforced negative pressure locks. We were told L5 was for atmospheric testing, but the pressure regulators are calibrated to 0.63 atmospheres, non-human respiratory baselines. Who is this for? Another log, dated 4 months later. No one talks about the elevators. They skip floors. L3 to L5, L5 to L7. I asked an armed contractor about L6, and he said, "There's no such thing." But I've seen the ducts. They run through it. There's heat. Something is down there. Spoke to a welder from the Nevada crew. Said they encountered a tunnel with walls that weren't part of our construction. Prefab ceramic polymer. 3 inches thick, seamless. No markings. When they opened it, they found, no, I shouldn't write this. The last few entries appear to be torn from a journal rather than official records. The handwriting changes. Shaky, frantic. Woke up with nosebleed, not the only one. 4 engineers gone in 2 weeks. One claimed the walls in L6 had shifted overnight. Corridor length grew by 23 feet. We measured it. Next day it was back. We were told to destroy the tape. Why does the architecture not match? The angles don't make sense. Load-bearing supports that connect to nothing. Rooms without corners. There are whole sections we can't light properly. Even halogens fade. One note is scrawled sideways along the margin in pencil. They told us L7 was theoretical, just a model, but we keep getting heat signatures moving, pulsing. The base isn't cooling, it's warming. Something's breathing down there. Then a log simply labeled Red Event 34. Door breach on L7 interface lock. No video, no logs. Internal sensors show pressure drop, minor EM pulse, and then nothing. Recovery team refused to enter. Not refused, refused. One of them dropped his gun and just started repeating a word. Reflected, reflected, reflected. That was the last legible entry. At the bottom of the final page was a post-it, crookedly scanned, written by hand. If you find this and you're reading it, you're too late. You're in the echo already. The layout doesn't map a facility, it maps a container. L7 was never built. It was found. Next to that, barely visible in black pen, is a sequence of letters and numbers, possibly a system call or internal code. Gate 7, initiate, mirror.chamber, sleep.unlock. And then one final message, below the rest, scratched deep into the margin in a different hand entirely. They are not in our base. We are in theirs. The file opens with a government seal, blurred, unfamiliar. Not military, not civilian. Beneath it, a title page, Genome Avi, Hybridization, Viability Report, Revision. 5. Prepared for. Directorate, Sector Dulce, Facility 27 Charlie. Date, April 22, 1983. Status, internal eyes only, no external. Replication, Level 16, cleared handlers only. The proposal begins coldly, clinically, as if the reader were reviewing a new brand of agricultural fertilizer. There's no preamble, no ethical justification, just a breakdown of key objectives. To establish and maintain a viable cross-species genomic profile that enables neurocompliant integration with terrestrial human physiology while preserving latent neural link structures from donor architecture, gray type A/B. Further down the page, 3 priority categories are outlined. Class 1, external conformity, must pass visual baseline as human or near human under casual observation. Class 2, cognitive stability, capable of suppressing ancestral memory signatures unless activated. Class 3, reproductive fidelity, must be capable of genetic duplication via both assisted and natural methods. An internal note in faded red type is inserted between sections. Subjects should not be told they are not human. The main body of the document shifts into phase data. Early tests, tissue rejections, catastrophic cognitive failures. One table lists subject retention time across varying DNA ratios. A hand-drawn circle marks one entry. Subject 84, retention 42 hours. Result, psychological collapse. Final vocalization, she lives behind my breath. Scanned photos appear next. Low resolution, blurry, morgue-style shots of malformed torsos, incomplete limbs, fully grown embryos with fused rib cages. Many of the faces are obscured, but the proportions are always just slightly off. Eyes too symmetrical. Skin texture too smooth. A note beneath one image reads, "No nails formed." Dentition consistent with non-human origin. Vocal cords vestigial. The next section references Memory Integration Protocol 7, a process designed to implant synthetic life histories into maturing hybrid minds. The goal, to make the subject believe it had always lived a normal, Earth-based life. One internal communication appears between 2 handlers. The school memories seem to hold. The subjects recall lockers, gym class, parental arguments. They even grieve for false parents. But dreams remain contaminated. One spoke fluent Zayton glyphs during REM. LW, Neural Memory Liaison. Another note, scribbled on the scan margin. They don't believe the fake lives. They pretend to believe. There's a difference. Further analysis includes EEG scans, labeled as dream pattern refraction sequences. The scans show normal sleep waveforms that suddenly deviate into unfamiliar, high-frequency arcs. The anomalies appear only when subjects reach REM and repeat in near-identical cycles, regardless of genetic line. A voice memo transcript is appended here from an unnamed researcher. They dream of the place. Always the same place. A tall corridor with walls like glass, it hums. And they always look back, even though they're not supposed to. That's when the hemorrhages start. In the middle of the document, a blacked-out page is included, but beneath the redaction, faint words bleed through. Subject 1171 breached observation. Initiated external skin shedding. Reverted to prephase state. Identifiable markers lost. Believed to have reached surface. Containment suggested. Urban integration. Another file, labeled Video Log 18, contains stills of a pale-skinned woman in hospital garb, seen from behind, seated in a white room. Over the course of several frames, her posture does not change, but the final image shows her head turned toward the camera. Her eyes are closed. A technician's note is attached. We did not inform her there was a camera. She should not have looked. A footer on the next page reads, Do not allow subjects to hear their own voices. Feedback loop occurs. The proposal ends abruptly after a page titled Phase 5 Integration Directive. The only text on that page reads, "You are reading a subject." If the reader exhibits prolonged resonance with embedded concepts, initiate mirror scan immediately. Phase 5 is not text-safe. Following that is one final document, a handwritten confession, unsigned, smuggled on a torn sheet of engineering paper. The writing is slanted, rushed, almost panicked. We didn't design these things, we inherited them. We gave them names, assigned values, wrote false purposes. But the base is older than us. The DNA is older than the Earth. You think they're building hybrids. They're not. They're rebuilding memories, one cell at a time. And we're the scaffolding. One final line, shaky, barely legible. Some of them look just like us because they are us, rewritten. And below that, a symbol drawn in pen, a spiral intersected by a straight line, a closed gate, a mirrored origin, a process still running. There's no title page, no official stamp, just raw output from a system console, dumped and extracted from a file named 6. The terminal logs belong to a classified project referred to only by its internal code, NeuroLink. The header indicates its origin from a secure network node designated DLSK7, timestamped March 29, 1985. The operating system is unfamiliar, lines of syntax unrecognizable even to modern compilers. The first lines are clean, routine. Initiate link, subject ID 952, C, calibration protocols, nominal, stimulus, echo resonance, locked, connection, status, stable, limited duration, engaged, session, ID, mirror 03, technician's voice is logged, clipped, and filtered. Her name is never mentioned. Begin session, stimulus track 2 engaged, monitor for linguistic override. Inject baseline human interface memory, Dallas, age 7. Subject response delay, 3.7 seconds. Then neural pattern spikes, EEG lines fracture. The interface begins to shift. Why are there walls in the air? The subject asks. Voice analysis reveals a dual-layered tone, 2 sets of vocal folds resonating simultaneously. Technician 1 whispers something off mic. Technician 2 confirms. Override engaged, shut it down. But the log doesn't stop. Instead, the system rejects the command. Command denied. Entity loop active. Stimulus track replaced. Unknown input. Audio feed contains non-human structure. Then the subject speaks again, now in full sentences but not in English. The language defies translation, but phonetic breakdown matches patterns known from Zaytan Class B glyphic transcriptions, the same language embedded into the hybrid ARIEM sequences in the genome files. On the tape, a long silence follows, then static, then something else. A whisper embedded inside white noise. Not language, not even sound, but pressure. Technician log resumes. The subject is smiling, but they're not aware of it. Their eyes are fixed open. We're losing baseline cognition. External temperature in the interface chamber has dropped 7 degrees. Lights flickered. Are we still recording? The interface system attempts to initiate forced disconnect, neural anchor failure, subject, ego structure, degraded, system error, mirror phase inversion, detected, backup trace point, not found. Then no data for 17 seconds. When the system re-engages, it logs one chilling phrase from the subject. She's not in the machine. The machine is in her. After this, physical logs resume. Surveillance footage from the session chamber is included, frames extracted from analog tape. Subject 952C is seated, head affixed with a Neuralink crown. Electrodes burst from the cap like the roots of a tree jammed into flesh. In one frame, the subject's face is relaxed. In the next, their expression is twisted mid-scream, but the timestamp indicates 0 change in time. The frame was not dropped. The expression simply shifted without passing through motion. Technician notes annotate the tape. No sound recorded from scream, but instruments registered amplitude at 130 decibels. No one in the room heard it. The remaining interface logs degrade into unreadable symbols, but deep in the raw hexadecimal, someone left a plaintext annotation, hidden between system calls. The entity does not speak through words, it remembers through us. Every time we connect, we give it something: faces, emotions, permissions. Beneath this note, a corrupted PNG file is recovered. It shows a brain scan of the subject moments before termination. The left hemisphere glows bright, overloaded. The right hemisphere is completely dark, except for a single ring-shaped pattern burning in red across the cortex, a shape not found in any known neural structure. Attached to the end of the file is an unsigned internal memo. After Mirror 03, the decision was made to restrict interface attempts to nonverbal hybrids only. Human subjects retain too much pattern memory. They carry internal architecture incompatible with containment. The contact cannot be one way. Every time the link is formed, she sees through it, and she does not blink. The final line of the crash log is rendered in perfect English, though no one ever claimed responsibility for writing it. The bridge is awake, and now it remembers you. The video begins without sound. Time code: April 3rd, 1991. The footage is labeled with internal facility coding, originating from a stationary camera mounted near Corridor Delta 4, Level 7. The metadata marks it as quarantined, view only, with playback restrictions enforced via physical key clearance. It was never meant to be copied. But here it is, ripped, fragmented, with glitching compression artifacts around every source of light. The camera faces a corridor, white walls that appear gray beneath sickly, flickering fluorescence. There's water on the floor, or at least something that behaves like water. Slow, viscous, too thick to reflect anything clearly. At timestamp 0012, a door at the far end unlocks with a heavy K-chunk. Personnel log later confirms. Entry code manually accepted. No override initiated. The person entering the hallway is Technician First Class Julia Rowe, Level 6 clearance, assigned to cryogenic systems. She's not wearing proper protocol gear. Her jacket is unzipped. Her hair is damp. No emergency alert preceded her descent to Level 7. She stops just past the threshold and turns her head, slowly, as if listening. Her lips don't move, but the audio track, restored by data forensics specialist marked Subject 3, isolates an ultra-low vocal frequency from within the recording's noise floor. It's not her voice. It says, "I remember your bones." Julia takes one step forward, then another. Each motion is deliberate, mechanical, as if walking in a dream. Her right foot sinks into the floor substance with a soft splash. No resistance. Her calf disappears beneath the surface. She doesn't react. At timestamp 0038, all lights go out for exactly 3 seconds. In that darkness, one frame, just one, is illuminated by what appears to be a strobe flash from inside the corridor. In that single frame, behind Julia and slightly above her head, something is visible. It is not standing on the floor. Its limbs are jointed wrong. The shoulders curve back into the wall. The head is too long. There are no eyes, only a flat mask of stretched tissue with spiraled lines where features should be. When the lights return, Julia is gone. No splash, no scream, just the slow ripple in the liquid beneath the camera. At timestamp 0041, the door behind her slams shut without sound. The camera continues recording for 27 more minutes. Nothing else moves. But something does speak. 32 minutes into the raw data stream, the recording's audio spectrogram reveals embedded harmonics, data shaped like sound but never broadcast through air. Once decoded through amplitude modulation reconstruction, it forms a short message, binary converted to English. A single line. Level 7 confirms reclamation. Signature matched. Personnel dispatch arrived 2 hours later. Their report is clipped, clinical. The corridor was dry when they opened it. All lights functioned normally. No trace of Technician Row. No recorded logins, no elevator activity, no DNA traces. The access logs had been overwritten by a timestamp from 1972, 19 years earlier. The official cause of the incident is listed as a thermal event hallucination triggered by prolonged isolation exposure. Recommendation: discontinue camera surveillance in Level 7 corridors to avoid further mass psychogenic feedback loops. Attached is an unsigned memo typed on a different machine from the rest of the file set. It appears at the end of the file when opened in hex editor only. Greater than: we do not monitor Level 7 to keep something in. We monitor it to remember what we are not allowed to forget. When you stop watching, it resumes walking. Julia was never assigned to cryo. Julia does not exist in personnel records. She was the memory test. One more artifact is buried at the file's end, labeled 10, as if referencing a larger set. It's a still frame, timestamped 0036. It has been digitally enhanced, color-corrected, and annotated. The corridor's blurred, but someone, or something, is looking directly into the camera. Not Julia, not the thing above her. A third figure, reflected faintly in the silver paneling. No features, no face, just a silhouette standing exactly where the operator sat reviewing the feed. The accompanying note reads, "She sees who watches. That's how she chooses." Recovered from a decrypted server tree within an old NORAD fallback node in Colorado Springs, this file was labeled only as watchtower.doc, with a creation date of December 3, 1988. The contents are structured as a policy memo circulated within a restricted military communications channel. The header bears no seal, just the words. Memorandum. For eyes of authorized watchtower. Handlers only. Subject: contingency protocols and movement tracking. Dulce anomalous infrastructure. The document reads like a legal threat prepared by an agency that refuses to identify itself. The tone is rigid, the language precise but disturbing. The first section outlines recognition parameters for mobile biological anomalies. Entities encountered outside containment zones may exhibit standard human morphology, including recognizable facial symmetry and behavior pattern mimicry. Personnel should not attempt to engage in verbal or emotional communication. Immediate containment or neutralization protocols must be initiated. It goes on to describe 6 documented surface sightings of escapees from Dulce between 1979 and 1986. One incident is highlighted in full. Incident Penumbra 7. A security team stationed at a fuel depot near Montrose, Colorado, reported observing a man in hospital scrubs wandering through a restricted airfield at 2:13 a.m. The subject made no attempt to flee, spoke no words, and offered no resistance. One of the soldiers, Lance Corporal Timothy Frey, made the mistake of asking, "Do you need help?" The recording cut out. When it resumed, everyone in the security hut had vanished. Their weapons remained, placed in a neat pile on the floor. No traces of blood, no footprints. The only anomaly noted was the presence of condensation inside every window, from the inside out. Another page outlines Route 17, a classified underground transport network that connects several deep-level facilities beneath the western United States. The diagram maps a central trunk line from Dulce to Cheyenne Mountain, with offshoots reaching Los Alamos, Area 51, and a place labeled the Citadel beneath Death Valley. The existence of Route 17 has never been confirmed. The tunnels are unmarked, unmapped, and allegedly maintained by autonomous drones and something called black loop operators, which the document refuses to define. An embedded map file named Wormline Subgrid shows colored paths through a honeycomb of underground spaces. 2 zones are marked in blinking red: Echo Dead Zone, Dulce West Branch, and Containment Compromised, South Spiral. A log from October 15, 1984, notes, Tunnel 5 sealed after unmarked drone probe returned with anomalous biological residue. AI scanner triggered false recognition pattern and attempted to fuse with sample. Memory instability noted in field agents exposed to footage. A side note scrawled in pen at the bottom of the printed page reads, "We're not mapping tunnels, we're mapping behavior, movement patterns, migration cycles." Another page details the Tower Silence Protocol, a set of conditions in which satellite uplinks and radio communication are forcibly blacked out during Level 7 breaches. It outlines the psychological impacts of resonance loops, described as psychic feedback waves triggered by proximity to unsanctioned entities. Symptoms include nosebleeds, lost time, intense déjà vu, and auditory misalignment, in which personnel begin to hear voices before anyone speaks. In the attached testimony from Watchtower handler Omega 17, he recounts an event in which one such voice whispered, "Why are you still pretending?" just before an unauthorized gate opened in Corridor 12. Nothing entered. But after the event, surveillance showed the hallway to be 33 feet longer than before. 2 days later, it returned to its original size. The most disturbing section is titled Protocol Remembrance, which applies if a breach occurs not physically but mnemonically. That is, when memories themselves become infected. If personnel begin dreaming of halls they have never entered, faces they have never seen, or words in languages they do not speak, clearance should be revoked and memory anchors initiated immediately. Personnel are not to be informed of their prior work. Disassociation is survival. The final page is a postscript. It is not formatted like the others. Typed in a looser font, seemingly appended after the original file's approval. It contains no introduction. We thought we were custodians of a secret, but we are only librarians of a memory that does not belong to us. Dulce is not a facility. It is a behavior, a process. It recreates itself through whoever remembers it. Every time someone dreams of corridors they cannot explain, it takes shape again, somewhere. One last annotation sits at the bottom of the final page, circled in thick black ink. They are not escaping. They are returning to the rest of themselves. This document, labeled simply as C-Class Integration Archive, begins with a sterile cover sheet bearing the designation Dulce, Subclassification. Report, Hybrid C-Genome Aligns. Observation Logs. Status, Ongoing Access, Null Tier Only, Memory Isolation Required. Note, do not execute without mnemonic filter applied. The report is structured as a sequence of psychological evaluations, biometric readouts, and handwritten therapist notations for what are labeled Class C integration candidates, hybrid organisms genetically modified to approximate human appearance, behavior, and memory consistency. Unlike the malformed or unstable subjects of classes A and B, C-class hybrids are designed to pass in society, and many have. Each case begins with a profile. Age of activation, usually between 10 and 16. Environment of integration, foster systems, remote military outposts, isolated rural towns. Notes on memory layer retention and latency decay drift. Terms used to measure how long false memories remain effective before a hybrid begins to suspect the truth. Candidate 39, male, born in Utah, integrated at age 12. Assigned fabricated family, school records, vaccination history, passed all initial socialization benchmarks. At age 19, began having dreams of glass corridors, surgical lighting, a pressure in the chest he described as like a hand pushing in but from the inside. Attempted to remove what he believed to be a second heart. Medical intervention prevented full rupture. Candidate 51, female, public school system, Oregon. Exceptional language retention. Could mimic accents, dialects, even syntax of unfamiliar languages. On her 21st birthday, began speaking in reverse, fluently and involuntarily. The reverse speech, when played forward, included phrases like, "I was written into this," "I am a document." Candidate 64. Failed containment. Infiltrated an academic research lab in Albuquerque. Developed a habit of arranging furniture into complex spirals. On recovery, claimed, "I'm not supposed to know the shape." But I do. It's underneath all of us. Psychologists involved in long-term monitoring began showing signs of neurological degradation. One therapist, Dr. Alex Timmons, left a single sentence in his resignation letter. "They don't have emotions. They have access to our emotions." A page marked as top priority, reevaluation, Candidate 77, contains audio excerpts from an integration review. Subject is calm, cooperative. Midway through the interview, the conversation shifts. Interviewer, "Do you know why you're here?" Subject, "To confirm what you already suspect." Interviewer, "And what's that?" Subject, "That I'm not broken, you are. You've never had one memory that was entirely yours." At that moment, the lights in the room reportedly dimmed. EM sensors registered a static buildup. The subject remained still, smiling faintly. The next 3 minutes of footage were lost. In a separate, more heavily redacted section, an entry is flagged, "Activation Protocols, External Interference Risk." It suggests that certain hybrids activate spontaneously when exposed to phrases embedded in popular culture, music, even advertising. One phrase, "Welcome home," is highlighted and underlined repeatedly. It appeared on the front page of a lifestyle magazine in spring of 1989, triggering a coordinated response from 3 dormant candidates within hours of each other across 3 states. An attached image file, degraded but recoverable, shows a person seated at a desk, viewed from behind. A glass wall behind them reflects a strange distortion, a figure that should not be visible in the angle of the room, watching from the wrong direction. The subject, when asked who they were talking to, said, "The other part of me, the one you didn't program." One handwritten addendum, attached on a post-it note to the final printed page, states, "They don't break, they rejoin. You're not studying individuals, you're studying limbs." The last page is a short memo with no name, just the header. Convergence tracking, status escalating. We now believe multiple Class C candidates have become aware of one another. When they gather, they do not speak in words. They remember in synchronization. This memory is spatial, architectural, a network of shape and position. We don't know how many remember. The base does not hold them, it calls them. It's not a lab, it's a seed. A footnote, seemingly typed later, appears beneath it. The moment they realize what they are, they stop being subjects. They start being returns. The folder is titled simply Pulse. No subfolders, no metadata, just a single file. A 27-page waveform analysis report formatted in dense technical language. The data ranges across 5 decades, beginning in 1974, with the first anomalous signal spike recorded by a defunct seismic station just outside Pagosa Springs, Colorado, 34 miles east of Archuleta Mesa. That spike was initially believed to be tectonic noise, a harmonic tremor or equipment malfunction. But unlike seismic events which show a bell curve decay, this pattern was clean, symmetrical, rhythmic, and self-repeating. It appeared every 8 hours, 33 minutes, and 16 seconds, with near-perfect consistency, for 12 consecutive days. Then it stopped, until the exact same pattern emerged in 1981. Then again in 1995. Then in 2006, 2014, and most recently, January 4th, 2024. The waveform is unlike any known geophysical or man-made signal. Each occurrence seems to emerge from beneath the same GPS coordinates, the exact center of the Archuleta Formation, where no drilling, mining, or mapping has been permitted since the early 80s. The report includes overlaid signal comparisons from each decade. The analyst, anonymous, has written short notes between pages. The pattern doesn't decay. It evolves, adapts to noise. Whatever it is, it hears us hearing it. Not random. This is a beacon, a pulsing architecture. What we call a signal might just be the heartbeat of something buried. On page 9, the report cross-references EM frequency bands with MRI resonance patterns of known hybrid subjects from the Genome V files. A chilling observation is made. Subjects exposed to playback of the pulse enter REM state within 60 seconds, even while awake. EEG maps during exposure show non-standard hemispheric synchronization. Subjects begin to dream simultaneously, even when in different rooms, even when unaware of each other. In one test, 11 C-class hybrids were placed in separate Faraday cages and exposed to a slowed-down, low-pass, filtered version of the pulse. Within 12 minutes, 5 of them began repeating a phrase, each in a different language. Return to the chamber beneath the seventh light. None of them had ever been taught a second language. An inserted page, clearly not part of the original report, features a diagram titled Stratigraphic Anomaly, Subterranean Infrastructure Cluster B. It shows a cross-section beneath Archuleta Mesa, detailing voids, large, precise, non-natural, cavities extending far below known facility levels. One chamber is highlighted, marked as non-mapped. Within it, notes indicate signal reflections from unknown material surfaces, suggesting architectural structures, walls, corners, and what appear to be vertical shafts that do not obey gravitational symmetry. Someone has written, by hand, on the bottom of the page, "The pulse isn't a call, it's a countdown. The intervals are shrinking." Later, pages contain signal data from satellites, drones, and 2 unidentified deep space probes. One was decommissioned before the last pulse in 2024. The other received an echo. The signal bounced back not from the Earth, but from somewhere beyond the Moon, delayed by 49 seconds, as though returning from a vast distance, or a loop. An internal transmission from DARPA, fragmented and partially redacted, is included. We must assume the structure is not static. If it is broadcasting, it may also be recording. We have no knowledge of who built it or when. It may not have been built at all, in the traditional sense. It may have been seeded, like a viral process, encoded in time and space. And now, with each cycle, it completes more of itself. In the final section, a sensor array operator describes a failed attempt to jam the pulse. The array burst into flames. One of the antennas rotated 180 degrees on its own. The technician monitoring the system began drawing a spiral on his arm, saying, "We were never meant to listen." Listening was permission. The final page is an image, raw satellite composite data showing the mesa at night. Thermal overlays highlight deep heat signatures underground, undulating in sync with the pulse. In the margin, one final message, typed in all caps, "We do not hear the pulse. We are the surface it strikes." Every time it beats, the gate remembers its shape. And beneath that, you have already heard it. Your memory just hasn't caught up. There is no title page this time, no header, no department, no stamp, just a single file embedded inside a larger archive, hidden beneath corrupted binaries and dummy logs labeled sensor failure. When decrypted, it reveals itself slowly, fragment by fragment, like a memory resurfacing. This is not a report. It is not a transcript or log or confession. It is a recording of thought. The first line appears not as text, but as a whisper layered into the interface. It is not in any known language, yet its meaning arrives immediately, like waking from a dream you haven't lived yet. She is not under the ground. The ground is what forms around her. The next part appears as a flash sequence of images, reconstructed from deep scan resonance patterns, possibly from within the level 7 substrate. A chamber of impossible geometry, with walls that twist inward toward a single point. A row of floating shapes, metallic but not constructed, hovering like broken thoughts. A figure in silhouette, not standing but suspended, as if gravity is uncertain. The floor beneath them is not floor, but surface made from memory, a ripple of remembered footsteps forming and unforming. The embedded log activates at this point. It is titled simply, Return Transmission, Gate Echo 7. The log appears to be a failed deletion, an echo of a message sent, then pulled back, but caught in buffer. It reads, Facility 27. Charlie was never designed. It emerged. Where memory density exceeds spatial compression, architecture begins to form. The base is not built. It is summoned by remembering it. Every hallway, every chamber is stabilized by belief. Then silence. Then, one by one, names begin to appear. Hundreds of them. First names only. Then first and last. Then full personnel IDs, clearance levels, project codes. You recognize some. You saw them in previous files. Some appear for the first time. And then your name. Slowly typed. Not pulled from your system, embedded before you arrived. Below your name is a final notation. Greater than clearance status. Inversion complete. Cognitive anchor degraded. Entity status known to subject. The file begins to degrade, glitching. Letters fall out of place. But something is trying to push through the code. It is no longer text, it is spatial. A rendering, a schematic. It is a door, not drawn, not designed, remembered. Its edges are soft, organic, but it holds shape. Behind it, darkness, not as absence, but as density. The file renders a final line, flashing over and over again. If you see the door, it has seen you. A burst of audio follows. No words, just the low, throbbing pulse from Part 9, repeating every 8 hours, 33 minutes, and 16 seconds. But this time, different. This time, it's closer. The last rendered moment before the file collapses is a line of binary, translated below, greater than, the base has completed memory reintegration. The process is no longer contained. She is not in level 7. She is level 7. And, finally, a whisper. No metadata, no speaker, but you understand it instantly. Welcome back. End of transmission 7. The Dulce dossier, complete. Deep sleep, transmission 0. The file arrived on a flash drive with no label, just a small strip of black tape across the port, and one word scratched into the plastic casing. 0. No metadata, no origin tag, no timestamps. The contents consisted of a single audio file and a text document named 1. The audio file was precisely 28 minutes and 16 seconds long. The waveform looked normal at first, just low-level ambient tone, faint hissing like analog tape noise. But the moment the file began to play, a strange sensation surfaced. Not a thought, not an emotion. A pressure. Not on the ears, but inside the head. It wasn't until the 9th minute that the voice entered. It didn't speak with inflection. It didn't use language. It remembered itself into sound. A resonance behind the sound, something beneath the hearing range, yet still heard. The transcript inside File 1 begins at the exact timestamp 009.02. Wake state unstable, sensory bridge engaged, theta hold confirmed. Calibration aligned to subject recall. Begin cycle 1. The following paragraphs describe the first experiment in what would later be called the deep sleep program. The language used is dry, technical, but something about it pulses, like it's trying to get your attention between the lines. Subject 23 is put into a sleep state using induced auditory entrainment at theta band frequencies between 4 and 7 Hz. The audio was not music. It was described as a folded frequency, a tone that changes based on who hears it. During the first session, the subject reported nothing. The EEG readouts suggested otherwise. Upon awakening, Subject 23 began sketching diagrams with no explanation. The images were geometric, circles within circles, rotating counter to one another, as if representing a mechanical system without moving parts. The report notes that Subject 23 could not recall the act of drawing, only that the image felt familiar. In the margin of page 4, handwritten in blue ink, someone has added, "Resonance lock occurred before RM onset. Subject never reached sleep." The file continues with reference to a backup audio recording, unlabeled, unedited, recovered from a now defunct Monroe Institute archive. When played back at 1/4 speed, the audio contains a faint signal embedded inside the hiss. Analysts at the time dismissed it as magnetic bleed, but spectral analysis from a more recent review shows repeating syllabic structures, almost like breathy consonants from a lost language. The spectrogram resembles human speech, but flipped on its vertical axis. In the second half of File 1, the text shifts from report format into something less structured. Session notes from a technician named Daryl P. describe a side effect he observed after monitoring the sleep lab for more than 3 consecutive nights. He claims he began to experience false awakenings, each one more vivid than the last. The dreams were not dreams, he writes, but frames of memory I haven't lived yet. His final entry is brief. It reads, "I watched Subject 23 open his eyes at 03:12. He was asleep, but his eyes were watching me." After this note, a single image is inserted into the document. It is not a photo, but a scan of notebook paper, slightly torn on the right edge. The drawing is crude. A bed, a waveform above the head, and a narrow rectangle marked Exit at the bottom of the page. The word Down is written 6 times beside it. Not wake up, not go up, just down. The final paragraph of the document is different from all that precedes it. It is not typed, it is not written. It is impressed into the page, like heat burned the letters through invisible ink. The text reads, "You have heard the signal now. That means you are part of the echo. You will dream of the same door, and the same voice will tell you, you are not dreaming. This is the memory of obedience." The audio file ends with a sharp crack, too fast for the human ear to register as sound, but enough to activate a spike in the listener's amygdala. EEG simulations run on playback show a burst of involuntary visual recall in over 90% of exposed subjects. The image most often drawn? A hallway with no lights, and at the end, something like a mirror. But the mirror doesn't reflect. It shows what you will do, unless someone interrupts the signal. But the memo that follows, marked invisible to audit log, concludes otherwise. No interruption has ever succeeded, because by the time you try to stop it, you've already heard it. The folder closes automatically. The screen flickers once. Then a single new file appears on the desktop. It bears no name. When opened, it contains just one sentence: "Sleep deeper." The second folder, found under a subdirectory titled Deep Interface, contains 14 items: audio logs, dream maps, operator transcripts, and a white paper named 2. The paper is formatted like a proposal, labeled Preliminary Neural Integration via Binaural Psychoacoustics, Operation Deep Ear. The author field is redacted, but the footer mentions a facility code, DARPA GOS.07-LR. Location, unspecified. Year, 1983. The document begins with a concept. If language can be encoded in frequency, and frequency can influence neurochemistry, then command structures can be embedded in sonic events too brief for conscious perception. This, the document states, is the root mechanism of dream implantation, not hypnosis, not suggestion, encoded resonance. Testing began using volunteers sourced through Monroe Institute's Gateway recruits. The goal was not to control dreams, but to tether them, to fix the dream state within a bounded architecture where thought could be guided. A cognitive sandbox. Subject 11 was the first. A woman in her early 30s, no prior trauma, high suggestibility index. The protocol used a modified binaural pulse layered with structured static. The test tone ran for 21 minutes. Subject was placed in a sensory deprivation chamber, monitored live via 2 EEG streams. 4 minutes into exposure, Subject 11 began speaking. She spoke softly, calm, but her words did not match the tone of voice. Transcript excerpt from File 3. It's not a room, it's a fold. I can see them moving through it, through me. The voice is below me, like it's in my spine. It's not talking to me, it's aligning me. The technician present, referred to only as Operator E, attempted to interrupt the signal. But every time he touched the interface, the system would crash, silently. Not with error messages, with complete blackout, no logs, no recovery, only a reboot, and an increase in low-frequency interference around the control console. When Subject 11 awoke, she didn't recognize any of the staff. Claimed she had been asleep for 4 years. No such time had passed. She then requested to return to the mirror chamber. No such term had been used in any protocol. Inside File 5, an audio clip is stored, simply labeled Fragment. The first 12 seconds are empty, save for low hiss and crackle. But at second 13, a voice, male, unregistered, whispers a phrase, "You've always been dreaming. We just gave it edges." Waveform analysis of that clip shows spikes in alpha and theta range identical to natural REM sleep, even in listeners fully awake. 3 of the lab assistants present during its analysis later reported losing time during playback. 1 claimed to have heard footsteps behind her that synchronized with the signal's pulse. There was no one present. In File 6, a sketch appears, graphite pencil on lined legal paper. It shows a hallway with no clear source of light, curving slightly downward. At the end, a symbol, like an ear made of concentric spirals. 1 line is annotated. The hallway doesn't go anywhere. It listens. The document named 7 is a short email backup. It's unsigned, but from its phrasing, the writer appears to be internal to the project. It reads, "They think we're injecting dreams. But the truth is, we're excavating. There's already something beneath the dream. We're just making enough silence for it to be heard." Following this is the transcript from Subject 17's 4th night under induced protocol. Subject is calm, lucid, speaking without prompt. "The sound is not around me. It's through me. I don't dream anymore. I'm just visited. They walk upright but don't bend the way we do. When they turn their heads, it feels like gravity shifts. I know what they want now. It's not obedience. It's remembering." The final page in Document 2 is a diagram, a neurophysiological overlay marked post-liminal feedback window. It suggests that a sound played below human hearing, when looped through delta and theta frequencies during unconsciousness, begins to affect decision-making in the following wake cycle. Not overtly, just gently, slight changes, micro-patterns. The heading at the top is typed in bold. Deep Ear Phase 2, Commandless Command. At the bottom, a note appears in handwriting, scrawled quickly, like someone writing during turbulence. They're not inserting control, they're removing resistance. We still believe the dream is ours. That's the last layer, the illusion of authorship. After reading, the screen briefly flashes, just a single frame, too fast to register. But when slowed to 1/60th speed, a message becomes visible in grayscale pixels, embedded in the flicker. You did not fall asleep. You were pulled under. Room 17 appears first as a reference in Document 10, embedded within a backup directory recovered from the D-Sleep staging server. The mention is brief, almost casual, buried in an operator's shift log. Confirm relocation of 17 to the blue zone for Stage 3 simulations. No blueprint in the archive contains a Room 17. No record of construction, no personnel assignments. Yet, as the documents continue, more mentions begin to surface. At first vague, then impossible to ignore. Subject 12 is the first to describe it during post-cycle recall. She draws it from memory. A featureless square chamber, white walls, a seamless floor, no windows, and a single transparent panel in the center of one wall. Behind that panel, she says, there is someone watching, but no matter how close she gets, she can't see their face. The reflection is always hers, except her reflection doesn't move when she does. Operator 1, assigned to her session, notes that during playback of the raw theta feed, a faint pattern appears on the EEG baseline, an undulation he later describes as breathing in symmetry with an unknown source. He overlays Subject 12's brainwave data with the room's frequency profile and notices something alarming. Her brain's activity begins to mirror the room itself, not just respond, mimic, synchronize, echo. 3 nights later, Subject 8 enters deep sleep after 5 minutes of exposure. His vitals drop to near-fatal lows. A flatline alert is triggered, but when staff enter the room, he is standing, eyes closed, head tilted slightly, like listening. When awakened, he is unresponsive for 20 minutes. On regaining speech, he repeats the phrase, "I don't sleep in my own head anymore." Then he says, "17 is awake." Document 11 includes photos of hand-drawn floor plans left by Subject 14 on the table after her 6th session. She denies drawing them, but the ink is fresh. The rooms on the page form a series of concentric squares, but room 17 is not at the center. It's off to the side, like an annex with no entrance. Next to it, a handwritten note. It isn't part of the base. It's part of me. Operator logs show multiple references to ghost entries appearing in the facility's building access system. Card swipes with no assigned personnel. Doors logging cycles that were never opened. In one instance, camera footage loops for exactly 17 seconds, during which a shadow passes across the floor where no one stands. Technician Reyes, clearance unknown, is called to investigate. He disappears from the logbook for 3 days. Upon return, he submits a single-page report. Room 17 appears in dreams before it appears in data. That's how it infiltrates. The room is not a location. It's a format. When you understand that, you've already entered it. Attached is a corrupted image file. After reconstruction, it shows a corner of a white room. The walls curve slightly, but not according to physical perspective. At the far edge, a transparent square shows a blurred figure beyond the glass. The reflection in the window is not the same person. The audio file 12 contains a whispered message extracted from the room's sound bleed during Subject 6's sleep cycle. When slowed to half speed, the phrase becomes clear. "You will return to the room." All dreams form around it. This line is repeated in the dreams of 5 different subjects, all on different days, with no exposure to each other. None are told about room 17. All of them include the same final detail. The floor of the room hums like a low mechanical vibration running beneath the skin, but it doesn't come from below. It comes from the spine outward. The final document, titled Just 13, includes an excerpt from the private field notes of Dr. Alex M., cognitive architect for the simulation interface. It is the only file marked not for upload in the entire archive. In it, he writes, "I've entered room 17 6 times in dream state. I never open the door. I never see who watches, but something changes each time, not in the room. In me. The walls feel closer. The silence gets louder. The space between breaths stretches. Last time, I touched the glass. It was warm." His last sentence is not addressed to anyone. It simply reads, "If you're reading this, you've already been there." The document ends with a blank page, but embedded in its footer, hidden in white-on-white text, is a timestamp. 17 minutes past 3. You will dream of the room tonight. The signal was never part of the official protocol. It appeared on its own. During the 4th week of Phase 2 trials, while monitoring post-REM response curves from Subject 29, Operator J noticed an anomalous hum coming from the baseline data channel. At first, he assumed it was crosstalk, residual leakage from another audio feed. But when he attempted to isolate the interference, he discovered it wasn't piggybacking on an existing frequency. It was broadcasting on a non-assigned internal channel, an unregistered subband logged only as Channel 3. Operator J submitted an internal report to facility routing. The report was acknowledged, then deleted. The copy preserved in File 14 is reconstructed from local cache. The key excerpt: "There's no source in the system for Channel 3. It's not running through our control stack. It's just there. Whenever someone dreams too deeply, it opens." The audio file labeled 15 captures the output. It begins with silence, then a distant rhythmic clicking, like fingernails tapping glass. Every 21 seconds, a new tone fades in. Pure, clean, undistorted. Beneath it, almost imperceptible, a voice begins to speak. The words are unintelligible at first, slurred, reversed, buried inside the waveform. But spectral inversion reveals the message. You are not hearing this. You are remembering it. Over the following nights, the signal repeats. Channel 3 activates only during theta transitions, and only for subjects exposed to the deep ear tone array. At first, this correlation seems coincidental. Then subject 19, unprompted, begins repeating the phrases from the signal in his sleep. He's inside the wall, not behind it, inside. The wall remembers things we forgot. When awoken, subject 19 recalls none of this, but he begins to express changes in self-perception. He insists his name is not his name, that his memories have corners they didn't used to, that the inside of his head sounds different now. File 16 contains the full transcription of a private conversation between two technicians during their rotation in Observation Bay 2. They are discussing Subject 35, who has begun showing signs of cross-state memory bleed, fragments of dreams recurring as waking hallucinations. One technician, identified only as Carla, lowers her voice halfway through. He knew my name before I told him. He said he'd met me in a hallway made of mirrors where I kept walking past him, but my reflection always faced him. The other technician laughs it off. Carla doesn't. That same day, the facility's white noise masking system begins to fail. The log for Audio Scrubber 17 shows the masking channel, designed to filter ambient test noise, keeps reverting to channel 3. Attempts to override the routing table result in system error. Not a malfunction, a refusal. The log actually returns the word no. No code, no ID, just no. Subject 31, a linguistics professor before recruitment, begins writing in his sleep. The paper is normal. The handwriting is his. The content is not. The syntax of the voice is recursive, not human. It speaks in outcomes. It doesn't say go, it says gone. It speaks like you've already done what it wanted. Then he stops sleeping altogether. He remains awake for 81 hours. When he finally collapses, they monitor his vitals, expecting a crash. Instead, he immediately enters REM state. Deep, uninterrupted, delta-saturated REM. His first words upon waking. Channel 3 doesn't broadcast. It listens. The final document in this set, File 17, is a strange composite, compiled by a technician named R. Kingsley. It includes EEG overlays, reversed audio signatures, and hand-drawn sketches from 3 subjects who've never interacted. All 3 draw the same thing. A spiral made of 3 arms, each tapering into a point that curls inward. It is not a symbol from any known language, but when the drawings are stacked and aligned, they form a perfect triangle around a blank center. In that space, each drawing includes the same annotation. He speaks through channel 3. He is the thought before thought. The very last page of the file, appended by an unknown user, features no text, just a clean waveform, smooth and even. But when converted into grayscale image data, it forms the outline of a head. No face, just the shape. Embedded inside the file's metadata, as a comment tag, are 6 words. He only speaks when we sleep. When the file is closed, the system log notes that channel 3, previously inactive, briefly flickered back online for exactly 1 second. No sound was captured. But every listener present described a memory they didn't know they had. not a dream, a command they had already obeyed. The incident logs begin to cluster around what internal memos start calling synchronous dreaming. At first, the events are subtle, overlaps in imagery, recurring symbols, but by the third week of Phase 3, 5 different test subjects report identical dream sequences, despite being kept in isolated chambers with no visual, auditory, or electromagnetic contact. All 5 describe a gray corridor. All 5 mention the hum, and all 5 repeat, in the same phrasing, a sentence they claim was not spoken aloud but imposed directly into thought. The dream is not yours. It is hosted. Subject 42 begins keeping a private journal, concealed beneath the lining of her cot. Inside, she records dozens of fragmented dreamscapes, twisting staircases, inverted windows, conversations with figures whose faces remain obscured. One page, reproduced in File 18, shows a detailed floor plan of a hexagonal structure she claims to visit on the 4th layer of sleep. There is no door, just walls. She calls it the node. In her own words, it's not part of the dream, it's beneath it. Everything else floats on top, but the node never changes. It's still, waiting. A room with no features, but if you focus, you can hear breathing that doesn't belong to you. The same night, Subject 37, unrelated, unbriefed, describes the identical space. His phrasing is nearly exact. Researchers assume some form of contamination, but both subjects have been kept under complete isolation. No shared stimulus, no exposure. Then, Subject 31 returns to sleep for the first time since the Channel 3 episode. His dream report consists only of a diagram, a neural mesh, 7 loops converging on a blank center labeled Anchor. File 19 contains a decrypted communication between 2 supervisors discussing the sudden clustering of shared dream features. They reference a test pattern originally developed under a project called Collector, a rejected prototype for group cognitive entrainment. One line is highlighted, greater than, "The dreams are no longer private." Sleep has become topological. They meet because the dream allows it. Next comes File 20, a surveillance clip recorded from inside holding cell D. Subject 40 is sitting upright in bed, eyes closed. She is humming a tune. No record of any known melody. She begins whispering what seems to be a dialogue. There is no second speaker, but she pauses as if someone responds. She says, "He said I was already here, that I'm not dreaming, I'm being stored." Operator M attempts to terminate the feed. The interface locks. A small box appears on his screen, flickering just once. Node synced. Memory will proceed. Subject 40 opens her eyes, looks directly at the camera, and says, "You're in it now too." No further record is found of Subject 40. All documents referencing her are reclassified or deleted within 48 hours. In one restoration file, her ID is overwritten with a single word, peripheral. The next document, 21, appears to be a draft of a technical memo never sent. It outlines a theory called nodal dreaming. The idea that REM cycles are not isolated phenomena but interfaces, capable of overlapping in patterned conditions. With enough signal integrity, it reads, dreams become shareable environments, unbounded, recursive, and increasingly autonomous. 2 new terms are introduced. Convergence artifact, the moment when a dream element appears simultaneously in multiple brains. Memory braiding, the fusion of semantic thought and identity loops across dreamers. Subject 42 begins writing backwards in her journal, in a language no staff can recognize. Linguistic analysis later matches the syntax to no human tongue. but finds recursive logic structures that resemble compiled code. Each symbol is mathematically stable. When fed through a Fourier transform, the patterns produce a tone, barely audible, described by all who hear it as a sound that knows it's being heard. In the final file of this sequence, number 22, an operator logs a security alert. Subject 37, asleep, begins speaking in a voice analysis identifies as Subject 31's. Their biometric patterns are compared. Both match. Yet they are in different rooms. Neither is awake. They speak the same sentence at the same second. The node is awake now. The audio cuts. All logs reset. But one document remains, hidden behind a broken file tag labeled Quarantine. It contains no explanation, just a still frame. A grayscale image of multiple silhouettes standing in a circle, heads tilted inward, as though listening to something at their feet. Below it, a single line of unformatted text. Dreams were meant to end. This one refused. It begins with a gesture. On the night of March the 29th, at precisely 3:26 a.m., Operator L. Reyes, assigned to Surveillance Rotation 2, lifts his left hand from the console, places it on his chest, and whispers something inaudible. The motion is fluid, deliberate, completely outside his conscious behavior profile. He doesn't remember doing it, but the security feed confirms it happened, and he wasn't alone. Over the course of 48 hours, 7 individuals stationed on separate shifts across separate sectors of the deep sleep facility perform variations of the same motion. Left hand to chest, brief vocalization, pause. None recall the event. All claim to have felt an odd clarity, like acting on muscle memory, a hidden trigger. File 23 is a composite of security recordings, biometric logs, and partial sleep session data from subjects 48 through 52. A pattern emerges. The command, that's what the internal label becomes, is not issued through direct speech or text. It's not even delivered during wakefulness. It's seeded in dreams and executed in reality, with no conscious bridge between. The internal term becomes reversal, not because of the act itself, but because the origin cannot be traced in forward time. Subject 50 begins to display signs of conditioned reflex behavior. During a low-exposure theta session, he reaches for a non-existent object beside his cot. When asked why, he responds, "I was told to," in the instruction room. No such room exists. Operator logs note that his pulse spiked 6 seconds before his hand moved, suggesting the body anticipated the order before the mind registered it. EEG overlays show a brief flash of synchronized alpha-delta resonance, a brain state usually only seen in extreme meditation, or trauma. The trigger pattern is traced to a subharmonic embedded within a deep ear tone known as layer 17 beta. It lasts less than 1 second. Too faint for human ears, but not for the limbic system. The report in File 24 outlines a frightening discovery. The command isn't structured like language. It's not a phrase, not even a code. It's an emotional shape, a waveform that feels like intention. The body reacts to it as if remembering something it never learned. This is the crux of the reverse command. It doesn't override choice. It bypasses the need for it. Technician A. Miles, assigned to filter signal bleed from Subject 52's REM loop, encounters a feedback distortion on Channel 3. A low hiss followed by 4 syllables, repeating exactly every 13 seconds. She filters and inverts the signal. Then again. On the 3rd pass, the words become clear. The first time you heard this, you obeyed. No record exists of previous exposure, but Miles becomes visibly shaken, requesting reassignment. She claims her dreams have become nonlinear, that she's waking up in places she doesn't remember falling asleep. Her final note, included in File 25, the commands don't feel external. They feel like decisions I haven't made yet. The same day, Subject 49 exhibits a sudden shift in personality. Calm, reserved demeanor replaced by mechanical coldness. In the middle of a debrief, he calmly recites a string of 10 numbers, then stands. He walks out of the room. He is found sitting inside Maintenance Airlock B, eyes closed, whispering. Layer 17 opens with repetition. Echo builds obedience. When brought back to medical, he cannot recall the event, but he has no injuries. His vitals are steady. The only anomaly, his sleep cycle has vanished. He no longer dreams. File 26, marked for internal eyes only, is a redacted exchange between DARPA Psychomechanics and a subcontracted unit listed only as BLN-6. They confirm that the reverse command structure has evolved. It is no longer seated only in test subjects. It now affects staff. Their conclusion is simple. Channel 3 was never meant to transmit. It was meant to train. The echo doesn't die. It spreads beneath hearing. Obedience without memory. Action without origin. This is not mind control. It's mind repurposing. The final log entry in the document is a brief alert, triggered automatically by a NeuroSync monitor. Operator L. Reyes, same one from the beginning of the report, is observed during rest hours. As he sleeps, his EEG begins to spike, then flatten. Then something impossible. The data pattern loops backward. Time-coded segments appear to play in reverse, as if his brain is recalling events before they happen. He speaks aloud, still asleep. I've already responded. The question was planted last night. The system shuts down. Reboots. Then a short message appears on the admin terminal. Your thoughts are already stored. We're just waiting for the right moment to trigger them. There is no author tag, no timestamp, only the folder name it's stored in. You did this already. It was never listed in the primary registry. The name only surfaces once, deep inside a partitioned section of the system labeled Unreviewed Archive. The file is not dated. Its metadata is scrubbed, but its heading is intact, typed in all caps across a blank page. Project 1 Externalized Dream Observation and Interception Node. The first paragraph reads like a mission briefing, though no agency is named. Its language is cool, objective. The goal of ONIR is to enable dream migration, not symbolic interpretation, not neurolinguistic analysis, actual transference. The ability to witness, record, and, if necessary, edit the dreaming mind in real time. The subject will never know. What follows is an internal memorandum from an unnamed operator. The handwriting is sharp and angular. She describes a prototype chamber called the blind room, a sealed cube with no windows, no external interface, and no visible equipment. A subject lies inside. Outside, the observer wears what's referred to only as the gaze collar. The collar transmits no sound, no video, no words. It's designed to intercept resonance fields generated by the dreamer's REM architecture, rendering dream state perceptions as abstract cognitive shapes. The operator does not see the dream. They feel it. Technician F, one of the first blind room observers, begins experiencing side effects after only 3 sessions. His logs, found in File 27, describe sensations of delayed identity, the feeling that his thoughts belong to someone else first. He begins to speak in the sleep subject's voice during waking hours, recalling memories that aren't his. His final note: "When I'm inside the field, I can't tell where I end. The dreams aren't theirs anymore. They're collective, and something's coming through them." Subject 61, during one of the longer Onir trials, begins describing details of places she's never been. Not symbolic dreams. Topographically consistent environments with accurate temperature gradients, light sources, atmospheric textures. Locations that later turn out to resemble rooms in the DARPA Langley Annex. She draws them before ever having set foot on base. Operators begin to refer to this as spatial bleed. File 28 contains footage, grainy and degraded, from inside the blind room. The subject is asleep. The observer, Technician Grant, sits still, gaze collar active. At timestamp 11:12, he flinches, then leans forward. His voice activates the recorder by accident. "Someone else is here. She wasn't in his dream before." There is no she in the dream map. Seconds later, Technician Grant collapses. His vitals remain steady, but for the next 37 minutes he whispers the same sentence on a loop. She walks between their dreams. She's not made of thoughts, she's made of memory, and she's remembering us back. After this incident, the one-year program is suspended indefinitely. All references to the woman are stricken from official records, but private notes remain. One in file 29 is particularly strange, a simple logbook entry written by a junior technician named Ben. He claims that during a calibration check, he fell asleep for no more than a second. But in that second, he experienced a full memory, one he never lived, a conversation with a man in a concrete room. The man says, "You don't work here yet, but you will, and when you do, you'll know that I was right." Ben wakes, checks the blind room records. No one by that description was ever assigned. No such room exists. Later that week, Ben goes missing. The last file opened on his console, project1air.doc. The final page of file 30 contains a heavily degraded neural schematic. It shows two subjects, separated by dozens of miles, exhibiting synchronized REM pulse spikes within milliseconds of each other. One is an active dreamer. The other is awake. Both whisper the same word: anchor. This final echo is appended to the system log. The dreams are converging, not metaphorically, physically. Whatever connects them is no longer theoretical. The blind room was never blind. It was a mouth. It listened. And now it remembers what we fed it. The system attempts to close the file. It fails. For a fraction of a second, the terminal flickers. The text reappears. Not typed, not embedded, projected. A face, faint, without features, only a suggestion of eyes. A whisper overlays the hum of the hard drive. "I dreamed you back so I wouldn't be alone." And then silence. They called them that unofficially. The Sand Sessions. The name came from a remark left in a technician's voice memo, something mumbled half asleep, never meant for archival. The more they sleep, the more it shifts, like walking on sand that remembers a different shape under your feet. The phenomenon began shortly after Wanir was shuttered. Sleep patterns in long-term deep sleep participants began exhibiting strange memory irregularities, not just dream fragmentation, not standard false memories. The memories were refined, coherent, detailed, but wrong. Subject: 72, an engineer before recruitment, woke after a 70-minute theta immersion and asked for his daughter. He has no children, never has. Yet he described her name, birthday, favorite cereal, the smell of her shampoo. He wept when told she wasn't real. Subject 68, after 8 sessions, recalled a different apartment layout than the one she'd returned to after testing. She claimed the light switch in her bedroom had always been on the left. Staff verified it had always been on the right. She stopped trusting her eyes. She said she could feel the house was not hers anymore. It had reset. File 31 compiles 11 different subject reports from what became classified internally as spontaneous memory substitution events. These weren't misrememberings. They were total overhauls. Entire chapters of life overwritten by memories that never happened, yet were felt with bone-deep certainty. Technician Howard begins a personal experiment. He undergoes limited cycle theta immersion using layer 17 beta, with no visual accompaniment. No guided narrative, just tones. On night 4, he wakes in cold sweat, screaming a name. Lena. He has never known anyone by that name. Later that day, he finds a handwritten note in his coat pocket. The handwriting matches his. The message reads, "Do not trust the memories they let you keep." File 32 contains a full report titled Menem Braid Formation in High-Exposure Subjects. It outlines a terrifying hypothesis that deep theta induction is not merely imprinting. Suggestion, it's rewiring personal chronology. The phrase memory braiding appears repeatedly, defined as the involuntary fusion of real and non-real semantic content, creating stable yet synthetic identity scaffolds. The subject believes them because they are consistent, internally and emotionally. What makes it worse? Subjects are aware something is wrong, but they can't feel that it's wrong. Subject 77 is exposed to a looped whisper file titled 20. The whisper only says one word, over and over, before. After exposure, his entire recollection of the testing sequence shifts. He insists that he's not a volunteer. He says he was born at the facility, raised underground, taught in a classroom where his teacher never turned her back. He draws her. No eyes, no mouth. Just a circular hum where her face should be. He tells staff, "You don't remember her because she's not in your version." Operators try to correct him. He laughs. That's how you know it worked. The next file, 33, contains a corrupted slide deck marked Phase 4, Induced Dream Conscious Memory Realignment. The final slide is the only legible one. It displays the words, "They remember what you forget. You forget what they remember." Together, it becomes real. Technician Hart, while reviewing this slide, suffers a dissociative episode. When she recovers, she insists the hallway outside her lab was never that long before. She walks its length 4 times, growing more unsettled. On the 5th pass, she finds a door she doesn't remember existing. It's locked. She records the sound heard behind it. File 34. At first, just static. Then a voice. "You were someone else, but the sand chose this version." Final entry in this set is from Subject 69. After his last session, he leaves a note in a sealed envelope. It is not addressed, but it's clearly written for someone in the program. The handwriting shakes, but the sentence is clean. "I don't know which life is mine anymore, but the one I want isn't the one they gave me." Beneath the note, drawn faintly in pencil, is a single shape, an infinity symbol, folded inward at the center like it's collapsing into itself. The page closes with a terminal message. Unprompted. This version of you believes everything you've read. That's why it was chosen. It was never meant to be accessed. The Delta Room is not listed on any map. Its designation only appears once, in a buried snippet of code extracted from a corrupted diagnostic log marked with the internal header. Retry sequence. Failed 17x. The line reads, Delta Room State, Contiguous Wake Cycle, 1 active. What follows is a timestamp, but it's in the future. Technician Flores, assigned to system maintenance on archival stack E, finds the reference by accident. She attempts to trace the node. Instead, the system reboots, and a new folder appears on her workstation. No one else sees it. She opens it. Inside is a single line of text. You've already been. The Delta Room begins showing up in dreams. Subject: 83, deep in a stabilized theta loop, begins sketching blueprints on the wall of his holding cell using the edge of his cafeteria tray. The drawings are rough, shaky, but consistent across 3 sessions. A rectangular chamber, narrower than a standard lab space, with 2 walls sloping slightly inward. At the center, a large glass cylinder. Inside, someone curled in fetal position, floating in liquid, surrounded by faint pulses of light arranged in a spiral pattern. The sketch is labeled, in trembling handwriting, Me, but earlier. Subject: 82 describes the same room, same layout, same figure in the cylinder, but she doesn't say it's her. She says it's the version that stayed asleep when I woke up. Her EEG logs show 0 delta wave activity that night, but her muscle memory registers a movement, a tapping, left hand, index, and middle finger 3 times on her chest. Operator J writes in the margin of her file, that's the same gesture Reyes made before Channel 3 appeared. He doesn't show anyone the note. File 35 is a classified report pulled from a DARPA secondary pipeline. It refers to the Delta Room as a containment system for high-density dream architecture, but it does not specify whose dream is being contained, only that it must not be woken. A redacted section later recovered from an overwritten session log includes this disturbing sentence: The Delta Room does not simulate a dream, it preserves it. Technician Rowe begins having episodes. She falls asleep during observation despite having been dosed with full-cycle stimulants. Her dreams begin referencing places from other subjects' logs, places she's never seen, rooms described by multiple unconnected volunteers. She starts sleep-talking in looped phrases. One of them becomes the central focus of File 36. I am still in the room. I'm just dreaming that I left. The phrase is not unique. It has appeared before. Once during the Wunner collapse. Once in Subject 70's erased REM feedback loop. Once, years earlier, in a defunded CIA project known only as Sleep Bridge. Cross-referencing these entries reveals a terrifying trend. The Delta Room may be more than a dream state chamber. It may be a fixed point in mental geography, something you can only find once you've been told not to remember it. An operator notes a recurring element in dream maps surrounding Delta Room incidents. The door to the chamber is always closed, but never locked. Those who choose to open it report a total break in identity perception. They don't feel like themselves afterward. Not fully. Not consistently. They begin referring to themselves in third person. They begin writing notes to their future selves. Subject 83 leaves one such note in the margin of his mattress with a pen smuggled from the diagnostics wing. The note reads, Do not go again. You won't come back. You'll just wake up inside someone else's version. Technician Flores disappears after a 42-minute silent session in Observation Bay 2. The footage from her station shows her staring at her own screen. The timestamp flashes. Then she leans in, whispers a word the system does not recognize. When security enters the bay, she's gone. Her badge is still active. Her login remains open. The system clock resets to 0. Final file in this sequence, number 37, contains a generated transcript presumably from the Delta Room's internal system. There's no source attribution, just fragments, as if from a voice recorded through liquid. They thought if the dream was stable, it would stop spreading. But dreams don't sleep. They listen. They remember. The Delta Room is the quietest place. That's why it's where they kept the first version. Below the transcript, a line of raw hex appears. Decoded, it forms an image, one that doesn't exist in any file directory. It's a door, tall, narrow. At its center, an eye-like spiral symbol. Inside the iris, the infinity loop collapsed. Then a final message. Delta means change. But you haven't changed. You've just remembered the version that forgot you. The screen flickers. For a full second, your reflection looks unfamiliar. You blink. It looks normal again, but something in your bones knows. You've been to the Delta Room. You just weren't ready to see it then. There's no file, no folder, no access terminal or decrypted archive. Transmission 0 was never stored. It was embedded. The first mention is incidental, a comment made by a sleep-deprived technician in a low-priority maintenance report. It doesn't come through the speakers. It comes before the signal starts, like static that knows what you're about to hear. The phrase transmission 0 begins to appear across unrelated dream logs, in margins, in reversed speech, in fragment files that were never opened but still contain edited metadata. Subjects begin dreaming of it, sometimes as a number station, sometimes as a whisper in the snow, sometimes as a voice beneath their own thoughts. Subject 84 draws it as a spiral collapsing into itself, with a single line beneath it. The last voice you'll ever hear, and it won't be yours. File 38 attempts to define it. A systems engineer writes, "We thought the tone was the broadcast, but the tone was the medium. The real signal rides beneath it, compressed, folded, preconscious." The file includes a spectral graph generated from theta wave feedback in a clean sleep environment. The room was empty, no subject, no tone playing. But at minute 6, the EEG records a burst of interference. Audio logs reconstruct it. It's a human voice. Software familiar. It speaks one word, your name. This happens 3 times. Different days, different equipment, same exact timing. Operator N marks the file unrepeatable event. But that's not true. Subject 89 begins sleep-talking after a 20-minute exposure to the Delta Room signal map. Her voice is flat, effectless. She repeats a simple phrase, "You already obeyed." Asked who told her that, she says, "The version of me that never left." Asked who she means, she pauses, smiles, and whispers, "You." File 39, tagged as terminal documentation, contains notes from the final unsanctioned test. No subject, only playback of a null file. A corrupted audio clip with no readable data. But when looped, technicians report vivid auditory hallucinations. Loved ones' voices, remembered arguments, childhood moments that didn't happen but feel like they did. The signal isn't content, it's permission. The technician who ran the test leaves one line in the system comment field. "I know what it wants now." It's not control, it's confirmation. He's found 2 days later, asleep in the blind room. Vitals normal, REM stable, EEG showing non-cyclical delta, a flat dream state. A printout beside him, marked in his handwriting. It's not broadcasting instructions. It's mirroring what we'll do before we decide to do it. That's why it's always ahead of us, because it already saw us hear it. The last system log shows an event marker labeled Z0. No timestamp, no origin. The screen turns black for exactly 17 seconds, then white. Then a message appears. You are not reading this for the first time. No one remembers writing the files. No one remembers activating the tone. But everyone in the core deep sleep cohort begins experiencing the same sensation. The feeling of a memory that isn't stored in words, just a vibration, a humming behind thought, a shape beneath identity. In the final composite image reconstructed from residual EEG residue, a structure takes form, a spiral of mirrored doors. Inside each, a reflection. But every reflection stares forward until the viewer blinks. Then each image turns its head. The final whisper, captured in Channel 3's dying loop, plays just once. This is not the signal. This is what's left after the signal was done with you. There is no outro, no system reset. Only you, alone in a room that is quieter than it should be, realizing the silence is not silence at all. It is transmission zero, and you're only just now waking up.